Chapter 7:15. The young man's face stiffened. Why are you like this? What kind of manners are you talking about? Qin Guang looked up at him. I'm just like this. Why? You're not happy? I'm bragging with my friend. It's none of your business. Did you take the wrong medicine or something? Sun Xiaoxuan pulled him away with a red face. Qin Guang, don't fight with others. You're a celebrity. It won't be good if word gets out. He was also quite vexed. She thought that this guy would control his temper now that he was famous, but it turned out that he was still the same firecracker as before. Fortunately, she was not his manager. Otherwise, she would have to work herself to death and clean up after him every day. Qin Guang was even more unhappy. So what if he was a celebrity? Celebrities should be pointed at by others. Why couldn't they have a temper? Celebrities were also people. Celebrities had their own temper. Celebrities also had their faces. That was true. Although what he said sounded a little boastful, I didn't say it to you, nor did I go on TV to brag about it. Why did you have to come back and brag? In other words, if a couple was lovey-dovey on the road and the young man bragged to his girlfriend, "Your man is the most handsome man in the world," then shouldn't other men chop this braggart into pieces? Besides, the old man wasn't bragging. What he said was the hard truth. Even if he announced it on TV, there was no need for him to apologize to anyone. You what? Shut up. Then scram back to your seat and sit quietly. Don't look for trouble. A person with real manners would first take care of himself before talking about manners with others. I'm not familiar with you and I don't want to be familiar with you either. If you scram now, I can pretend that nothing has happened. If you say one more word, I can scold you for 8 hours straight. Do you believe that I won't repeat myself? I'll scold you from Detroit all the way to Beijing. Once he started scolding, Qin Guang adhered to the principle of never losing with words. He had to use a storm-like offensive to make the other party unable to fight back and quickly admit defeat. Otherwise, if it dragged on for too long, it would only cause his words to become more and more low-end, and in the end, it would become a pitiful shrew swearing on the streets. Bastard. The poor young man was caught off guard by Qin Guang's surprise attack. They were both first-class passengers, but he felt like he was not Qin Guang's opponent at all. This guy is really good at talking. He must have cultivated in the market for 10 years, right? What are you doing? Tell me, is there something wrong with you? If you don't believe me, let others judge for you. You want me to apologize to whoever I want? Are you the god of morals? The difference between the two of them was just too great. This pitiful student from the Leiden Academy of Music had no way of retaliating against Qin Guang's barrage of attacks. He was nothing more than trash. The Pan Am flight attendant with blonde hair and blue eyes had already noticed the situation. She hurried over and said, "Sir, gentlemen, the plane is about to take off. Please return to your seats and fasten your seat belts." That's right. What kind of manners are you? You're making trouble on the plane. You don't even know how to pay attention to the international impact. You're from the Leiden Academy of Music? You're learning to cook, aren't you? Don't embarrass us Wuxia people. The young man was about to explode, but the plane was about to take off. The flight attendant reacted quickly and stopped him. She said seriously, Sir, please don't make trouble on the plane. Otherwise you'll be blacklisted by the airline." "It's him who has been scolding me. Sir, this passenger has been sitting in his seat. It's you who has been turning your head to talk to him." The flight attendant said something fair. Of course, there was another very important reason. She couldn't understand Qin Guang's street Chinese and he spoke too fast. "Okay, it's all my fault. I'm not well-mannered." The young man sat back angrily. He was still unwilling. He didn't look back and just shouted, "You wait. You'll see when we get to Yanjing." Qin Guang was amused. Yo, not bad. You can't beat me with words, so you ask me to fight? Come on, really. I've been challenged by many people in my life, but I've never been afraid. Sun Xiaoxuan saw that he couldn't hold him back, so he simply covered his mouth with his hand. All right. Don't talk too much. You're already an adult." The young man in front was also angry and laughed. "Don't think I'm afraid of you because I study music. To tell you the truth, I was the champion of Yanjing Youth Taekwondo competition when I was in high school." Sun Xiaoxuan had nothing to say to the young man in front of him. "Can't each of us talk less? You can't beat him. He's the strongest person in the world." "What a joke. Then I'm the reincarnation of Bruce Lee." "Boy, you've got guts. Don't run when we get to Yanjing. Qin Guang snorted. The Pan Am stewardess was rendered speechless by the two of them. However, even though the two of them were scolding, they still sat in their respective seats. Forget it. Let them do whatever they want. Just as she was about to turn around and leave, she took another look at Qin Guang. This bald man looks familiar. Yesterday, when they were having sex at his boyfriend's house, his TV was playing the World Arm Wrestling competition. This man seems to be right, Qin. The Pan Am stewardess looked at the angry young man playing the piano in front of her with sympathy. Forget it. As long as the two of them don't fight on the plane, it's fine. Poor guy. He'll be sent to the hospital, right? Sun Xiaoxuan quietly poked Qin Guang's waist. If you're recognized and posted on the internet, it will affect your reputation, right? Qin Guang shrugged indifferently. It's fine. I'm not afraid of being bitten when there are too many lice. Since the day I decided to take off my mask and become a celebrity, I never thought of living with my tail between my legs. Besides, I didn't say anything wrong. Anyway, there are a lot of people scolding me on the internet. It doesn't matter if there are more people scolding me. It's not like I'll lose anything. All right. I'm scared of you. Sun Xiaoxuan couldn't do anything to him, but he was secretly happy. If he really became the perfect lover of the public, what would happen? His current situation was actually pretty good. He wasn't perfect and he had his own temper. Some people liked him and naturally some people hated him. Anyway, no matter what, I'll be the person who likes him the most. Recently, Qin Guang had become a hot topic in China. The netizens hadn't even gotten a clue about the women incident, and the popularity hadn't subsided yet. Then he started all kinds of things. He had to play the piano, sharpen pencils in Guinness World, and live stream arm wrestling. There was no other celebrity in the world who could cause more trouble than him. Even at this moment, Qin Guang could sense the threads of faith pouring in from all over the world. It was rare for him to participate in a competition overseas, and his greatest harvest wasn't just the acknowledgement of his Qilin arms, but it also allowed him to gain international fame. Many foreign friends who didn't know him and didn't pay attention to him had also heard of his name because of his incredible achievements in the international arm wrestling competition. The spread of information had a certain spontaneity. A person would first find out through a certain channel that there was such a very special person. He was obviously very thin, but he had defeated all the heroes in the international arm wrestling competition and became the world's strongest arm wrestler. Then people who knew about this information would become curious about this amazing person. Then they would automatically search for relevant information about him. If this person could really convince them, they would mention this name when chatting with their friends, making Qin Guang's name fly further and further. Then many of the things that Qin Guang had done before would appear in front of more and more people and be remembered by them. Maybe they would even worship him. For example, now even if the world in the cup was full of faith points, there would still be new threads of faith points coming. It was just that due to the limitations of the heavenly Holy Grail, it couldn't get higher production. But at this time, the racing god training ground and the piano world could enjoy some of the aftertaste of fame. Although the growth of faith points was slow, the effect was real. When the plane finally took off and entered the stratosphere, the small TV on the back of the first-class seats began to play a program. In addition, passengers could also choose to use their headphones to listen to some music or to watch some variety shows. The superhumane Pan Am flight attendant did a very considerate thing. Under her strong suggestion, the program that was played by default on the TV was the highlights of the international arm wrestling competition that had just ended yesterday. Well, you could also call it Right Chen's Book of Pretentiousness. At this time, the Leiden music boy was still sulking in his heart. He was cursing Qin Guang in his heart, but because he couldn't beat Qin Guang with words, he didn't dare to stand up and turn around to provoke him. When the power of the TV finally came on, he took out his headphones and was about to listen to some piano music, but he was attracted by the image on the screen. The most incredible and strongest man in history. The god from the east. The arm strength of a god. A rather eye-catching and shameless title appeared in front of him, so much so that he thought he was seeing things. He shook his head to make sure that he wasn't seeing things. Who is this? Is he exaggerating? The music boy who had been traveling in Detroit for the past few days knew about this competition, but he didn't pay much attention to it. It seemed that the champion was Chinese? Interesting, then I'll take a look. 10 seconds later he was completely dumbfounded. What the F***ck? Why does he look so familiar? Isn't this the guy sitting behind me? Chen Guang? The name sounded a little familiar, as if he had heard it somewhere before. After that, the poor music boy couldn't be bothered to listen to the song anymore. He blankly watched the highlights of Chen Guang's competition. The more he watched, the more speechless he became. My heart hurts, I'm so scared. He had thought that Sun Xiaoxuan was joking. He didn't think that the guy behind him was really the strongest person in the world. What else could the young musician say other than gulping as he watched the beast press the monsters that were several times his size onto the table without being able to put up any resistance? Thinking about how he had arranged a fight with him, the boy felt creeped out. Should I find a chance to apologize to him? However, he felt very unwilling. That guy dared to insult his idol. If he apologized to him, wouldn't it mean that he agreed with what he said? Sai, what should I do? Chen Guang and Sun Xiaoxuan, who were sitting in the back, were also watching the highlights on the small TV. They didn't even need to think to know how scared the guy in front of them was. Chen Guang quietly unbuckled his seatbelt, stood on his tiptoes and took a peek from behind. He then sat back down with a smile. He's watching. You didn't see his face. It's pale. Sun Xiaoxuan was also curious. He also raised his neck to take a peek. He sat down and covered his mouth, afraid that he would laugh out loud. He didn't know why, although he felt a little embarrassed and apologetic to do bad things with Chen Guang. It was really fun. Brother Xiaolong, we agreed to have a good chat when we arrive in Beijing. If you're not convinced, you can call more people. Chen Guang said with a smile. It would be boring if he didn't find something to do during the long journey. Since this guy was so sincere, he might as well kill time with him. Sun Xiaoxuan pulled him again. Don't do this. The music boy was about to cry. Who would have thought that you were really so strong? Why did you change my name? My name is not Bruce Lee. Although he was cursing in his heart, the music boy smartly decided to cover his head with the blanket next to him. I can't mess with you, so I'll pretend to be dead. The flight attendants in the front row saw that they had achieved their goal. They smiled with satisfaction. They had once again resolved an international conflict. They didn't know that there were also two people in the cockpit lounge staring at the small TV in front of them. They were secretly thinking that there was something wrong with that guy. How could a normal person of this size have such strength? Since that's the case, I'll just close the cockpit door when I make my move. The flight time from Detroit to Beijing was about 14 hours. It was relatively long, and the passengers in the first-class cabin would have a lot of interaction with each other. Many people in China who had no interaction with each other got to know each other in the first-class cabin of such a long-distance flight. Eventually, it developed into a very important business cooperation. Chen Guang was now a celebrity. Although the music boy didn't recognize him, there were other people in the cabin who could recognize him. One after another, people who thought that they had the right status came up to talk to Chen Guang. They exchanged contact information and so on. They could talk about advertising endorsements or what Chen Guang was going to do in the future. They would definitely support him and ask for his autograph before leaving. Chen Guang had nothing to do anyway, so he was very patient. Halfway through the flight, the music boy gradually recognized Chen Guang's identity from his conversation with other people. He finally remembered that not long ago, someone had posted a video of a Chinese artist's concert on the school's BBS. The video focused on Chen Guang playing two different instruments. It even caused a controversy within the school. Some people thought that although his technique looked scary, it didn't mean that his performance was really that good. Playing the piano didn't mean that the faster you played, the better you would be. But some people did an in-depth analysis of his sound source and came to the conclusion that although Chen Guang's performance style was mediocre and seemed to have no special characteristics, he had a terrifying ability to restore the original music. It was hard to judge his artistic level, but his performance skills were definitely the best in the world. The music boy silently looked up at the ceiling of the cabin. Fortunately, I didn't bet on eating 3 pounds of sh*t. Thank God. Chapter 7:16. The plane took off at about 12:40 a.m. Washington time and arrived at Yanjing at 2:45 p.m. the next day. On the plane, Chen Guang chatted with Sun Xiaoxuan for a while, chatted with the successful people who came to strike up a conversation with him for a while, or read the script or put on his headphones to listen to music when he was bored. Unknowingly, about 12 hours had passed. The sky was still bright outside and the plane was flying straight across the Pacific Ocean. It was about dusk here. However, the cabin gradually became quiet, and only whispers could be heard from time to time. A few of the bosses who had just struck up a conversation with Chen Guang were flipping through the documents with sleepy eyes. Everyone's biological clock was about to go to sleep. Chen Guang wrapped himself in the quilt. Sun Xiaoxuan, who was beside him, had already fallen asleep. The girl's energy was not particularly good, probably because she had not fully recovered from the shock yesterday. Chen Guang pulled the quilt a little higher for her. As for accidentally touching something in the process of pulling the quilt, forget it, he did not care about those details. He would not know anyway. Before falling asleep, he tried to sink his mind into the heavenly Holy Grail to take a look. Yuli was still the same as before. This time she was completely in seclusion. It was a pity that he did not bring an anti-fog lamp with him so he could not see anything. As for the deer cry flower, no, it was now called the deer cry fruit. The huge green fruit was still hanging at the top of her stem, swaying even though there was no wind. It looked full of energy. Obviously, the 200 cubic centimeters of blood he gave her last time had greatly nourished her. This scene gave rise to a vicious thought in Chen Guang's heart. Is my blood really that nourishing? It can actually make the deer cry flower, which was already dozens of meters tall, jump a lot higher into the sky. According to the law of conservation of matter, this drop of the old man's blood can at least strengthen a generation of Chinese people, right? Why don't I try punching myself, get some nosebleeds, and then drink some of my own blood to nourish myself? Maybe my perfect body will come out, and the effect will be even better than Guijing drinking snake blood. Perpetual motion machine achieved. Alright, this is pure nonsense. Chen Guang threw this terrifying thought out of his mind, then closed his eyes and went to sleep. Before he fell asleep, he felt a little uneasy for a moment. Perhaps the power of the Holy Grail that surrounded him had collided with the mysterious and profound threads of fate, affecting fate and giving rise to a sense of alarm in his heart. However, he did not take it seriously. What could possibly happen on the plane? Other than a hijacking, it was a plane crash. What kind of joke was this? Such a melodramatic incident was so vulgar in novels. As the owner of the heavenly Holy Grail, how could the old man be so unlucky as to encounter such a thing? Holy shit, I really bumped into it. How sudden. I wasn't prepared at all, and this old man was hijacked. Chen Guang, who had just woken up, had a perplexed expression on his face as he listened to the arrogant and sinister laughter from the broadcast. Sun Xiaoxuan, who was beside him, shook his arm with all his might. Everyone, congratulations on becoming an honorable member of our crusade. The other party had obviously taken over the cockpit, but Chen Guang and the other first-class passengers had no idea about it. Therefore, the hijack was undoubtedly carried out by the crew. The flight attendants of Pan Am also walked out of the lounge, forcing themselves to calm down. They had experience in dealing with terrorist attacks in their training, but in a situation like this where the plane was hijacked without even seeing the person, even the most dedicated flight attendants could only be bystanders. Right now, the rear door of the cockpit had been completely locked. This was originally meant to protect the cockpit in case of an emergency, but it could not withstand the enemy's attack from the inside. What should we do? What should we do now? Sun Xiaoxuan mumbled to herself as she tightly held onto Chen Guang's arm. She was a little out of her wits, but she tried very hard to calm herself down. Chen Guang patted her hand. Don't worry, I'm here. He appeared very calm, but in his heart he was already wailing like a ghost and howling like a wolf. Sister Lioli, help me. Madame Lioli, help me. Madame Lioli, something big has happened. We're done for. Your savior has quit the game. Well, it was useless. Lioli had overdrawn herself yesterday. He was really exhausted. Don't be so rich. Be self-reliant, my brother Chen Guang. Lu Minghua's crisp, girlish voice came over. It sounded like she was teasing, but the content was too sad. Chen Guang's emotions weren't stable at all. Self-reliance, my ass. I'm just a pitiful passenger, all right? I hope everyone will be more honest and cherish their lives. You are all our precious hostages and our honored guests. The hijacker in the cabin spoke again, and it sounded a little more reassuring. It seemed that their tendency to self-destruct was not strong. They had something to ask of them. Perhaps they wanted to take hostages in exchange so they were safe for the time being. Except for Chen Guang. This guy suddenly added another sentence. He was simply crazy. Qin Guang could not even roll his eyes. You're poisonous. I don't even know you. I have no enmity with you. Why are you targeting me like this? Who the hell are you? Why? Qin Guang replied loudly. Mr. Qin, don't worry. I'll tell you when we arrive at Ioha base. As for now, you just sit quietly in your seat and wait. After that, the guy went silent and the course of the plane quickly changed. Obviously, the hijacker had quietly adjusted the direction. He didn't know where the Ioha base he mentioned was. Sounded like a country in West Asia. Seemed to be very scary. Qin Guang was dumbfounded. He thought to himself, when did I offend the terrorists over there? Why are they targeting me? Wait, the two unlucky extremists from last night? One of them seemed to be called Hamid. That's right, there's a name in both the place and the person. There must be some unspeakable connection between the two. This analysis was reasonable and convincing. Well, don't care about those details. In short, I'm being targeted and being retaliated against. This hijacking may be a coincidence or the other party may be targeting me. Anyway, it's not a good thing. Alas, this retribution came a little too fast. It seemed that it was time to let them see the power of the director of the Wuxia Special Affairs Bureau. In terms of administrative level, the old man was the highest level agent in the world, although he was useless. Qin Guang tried to wave to the flight attendant and called her over. He asked in a low voice, "Is there any way to open your cabin door?" The flight attendant shook her head helplessly. The other party is the co-pilot. He has the highest authority to control the plane. They also used physical methods and the system to double-lock the cabin door. It can't be opened. What if I use force directly? That alloy structure needs about more than 10 tons of pulling force. Sir, can you do it? The flight attendant's eyes lit up. After all, she had just seen his heroic performance in the World Arm Wrestling competition on a small TV. Qin Guang replied firmly, "Of course. Impossible." The flight attendant rolled her eyes and didn't say anything more. She returned to her seat and sat down. Qin Guang sat up straight again and comforted Sun Xiaoxuan, who was next to him. "It's okay. We will not die." Sun Xiaoxuan looked at Qin Guang with a worried face. "But they seem to treat you." Qin Guang waved his hand. "It doesn't matter. Don't you know who I am?" "Really?" "Of course. I swear. We will not die." Qin Guang calculated in his heart. If it didn't work, he would use all his assets to buy his life. What these terrorists wanted was either the release of their important people or money. Qin Guang didn't have much now, but he didn't feel bad about spending money. The old masters in Yanjing wouldn't turn a blind eye to it. They would definitely try their best to negotiate with them. At this time, the atmosphere in the cabin was extremely depressing. No one was mentally prepared for the sudden hijacking. The criminals quickly took control of the entire plane, and everyone in the cabin became fish on the chopping board without any resistance. Anyone would feel pain in the ass, and the situation in the economy class wouldn't be any better. The music guy in the front was already scared out of his wits. Eavesdropping on the conversation between Qin Guang and Sun Xiaoxuan, he suddenly sat up straight and looked at Qin Guang with excitement. "Mr. Qin, do you have a solution?" Qin Guang rolled his eyes. "Are you stupid? I have a chicken feather solution. Since you are also sitting in first class, you can calculate how much money your family has and whether it is enough to buy your life. Don't disturb me. I am busy." He was almost speechless at this idiot. "I am thinking of a solution, but why are you asking me? Are you thinking that I am not conspicuous enough?" At this time, many staff members, including the captain, were already lying in a pool of blood in the cockpit. Two men wearing Pan Am staff uniforms were sitting in front of the control panel with their legs crossed, chatting leisurely. "Malahi, are we really going to kill that Huaxia man called Right Chin when we arrive at Ioha? He seems to be a senior official in Huaxia. We don't have the final say on this. We have to ask Professor Alamo. Master Alamo's nephews died in the Holy War yesterday, and that girl was one of the hostages. Later on, that girl stayed in the hospital with Lechin for a night. Master Alamo thinks that Hamad and the others might have died at Lechin's hands. No wonder Professor Alamo suddenly asked us to take action. These damn heathens, we will avenge Brother Hammer." Of course, but Hammer and the others didn't die in vain. They raised $30 million for Professor Alamo. They are the most devout warriors of God, and their deaths should be honored with the highest sacrifice. That's right. But Right Chin seems to be very rich. Wouldn't it be a pity to kill him just like that? No, no, no. I also heard something else. Our ally, our closest comrade in arms, our instructor seemed to have a lot of conflicts with the Wuxia government recently. They want to get Wei Chin, and now their people should be waiting at Yoha base. The Terminator instructors? Yes. Poor fellow. Falling into the hands of those instructors will be a fate worse than death. Heathens don't deserve sympathy. I'm sorry, Malahi. At this time, in a place where no one could see, Qin Guang was standing in the Cloud City array of the Cup Realm. After a short hesitation, he finally realized that the current situation was worse than he had imagined. Lily had fallen into a deep sleep. She didn't move even when a lion roared beside her ear. When he tried to touch her with his hand, it would always be repelled. Lu Minghua didn't have enough authority to mobilize the heavenly Holy Grail and couldn't help much. If he didn't think of a solution and allowed this situation to continue developing, it seemed like he would really be finished. He thought of an ultimate move that he hadn't used for a long time. The after effects were very scary, but it was definitely useful. If it was a coincidence that the plane had been hijacked, he might really be willing to follow the other party to that whatever Ioha base. But the other party had directly called out his name, so he would definitely be given special attention. If he really went to their base, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to escape even if he had wings. He would thank the heavens if he could even beg for death, not to mention that Sun Xiaoxun was still on the plane. Forget it, let's do it this way. Who could he blame for encountering such a situation? Qin Guang's eyes widened. This was the first time he had actively exercised his authority as the owner of the Heavenly Holy Grail and tried to communicate with the Holy Grail while standing in Cloud City. Lu Minghua, who had originally planned to laugh at him, was suddenly shocked. What are you doing? Are you crazy? Qin Guang's eyes became brighter and brighter. He kept recalling the scene when he first sensed the realm of destiny. His mind roared crazily, using a commanding tone to shout at the Heavenly Holy Grail. Heavenly Holy Grail, give me the realm of destiny. That's right, Lily could no longer be counted on, and he didn't have any ability to change his current situation. He wanted to use the special training cup's realm at the last minute, but his faith value just happened to be 20 or 30,000 short. He couldn't even afford the beggar's version of the realm in the cup. Otherwise, he would have learned a lockpicking skill and tried to open that cabin door. Now that things had come to this, he could only personally sound the death knell of the unlucky fellow in the cockpit. Lu Minghua was dumbfounded. Crazy, you've really gone crazy. Sister Lioli said that you've already used the Bell of Destiny once. Don't you dare mess around. Qin Guang snorted. What else can I do? Wait for death. It's better to rely on myself than on others. You guys can't be relied on, so I have to rely on myself. Don't go overboard. The power of the second realm of punishment is beyond your imagination. Right now, the Holy Grail is only at the level of one-line heavens, it can't protect you. Lu Minghua was extremely anxious. Her vines once again grew wildly from her roots, sweeping towards Qin Guang in an overwhelming manner, as if she wanted to control him. But before Lu Minghua's vines could get close, they were shattered by the power of the Heavenly Holy Grail summoned by Qin Guang. She couldn't get close at all, so she could only watch helplessly. Qin Guang's figure gradually floated up. More and more power of the Holy Grail forcibly approached him and gathered around him, allowing him to fly higher and higher in the sky above Cloud City. Finally, gradually, the void in front of him exploded with thunder. A space-time tunnel that was completely different from the one he used to enter the realm in the cup slowly opened up in front of him with thousands of lightning bolts. Qin Guang looked into the tunnel. The unique majestic aura of the realm of life that didn't belong to the nine heavens had only been emitted, and when it lightly brushed against his body, it made his heart tremble violently. In his mind, the illusion of facing the hell-like might of the god of hell appeared again. There seemed to be a voice in the sky roaring at him, wanting him to submit to fate. In his eyes, it was as if he could see the towering mountain, the great river that swallowed the galaxy, the Kun Peng with a wingspan of tens of thousands of miles, and the majestic city that made people want to worship it. But the most terrifying thing was still the huge bell that connected the heavens and suppressed the mountains below. It was the bell of fate that affected the operation of the stars and suppressed all things in the world. Qin Guang took a deep breath, and suddenly plunged into the space-time tunnel that was filled with lightning and thunder. Last time, Lioli escorted him to the end of the tunnel and used his face to pierce through the barrier at the end of the tunnel. She also used the incarnation of the Divine Emperor and spat out the words of the Divine Emperor. She paid a huge price to finally help him pull out a strand of the power of fate. This time Qin Guang had to rely on himself. Chapter 717. With every inch he moved forward, at least 1,000 bolts of lightning struck his soul. Every bolt was like the edge of a blade, causing him heart-wrenching pain. Every moment felt like he was being sliced by 1,000 blades. He didn't know how powerful it was when he was brought in by Lioli, but this time he had to rely on himself. Only then did he understand how difficult it was to obtain a strand of the power of destiny. Just approaching it made his soul feel like it was about to be torn apart. He didn't even know how terrifying the pressure would be after entering the realm of fate. Not only that, after Qin Guang entered the tunnel, although the entrance to the tunnel gradually disappeared from Cloud City, the power of destiny emanating from the realm of fate still filled the entire sea of clouds. Even Deer Cry Fruit was suppressed to the point where she felt weak. Sister Lioli, really stop pretending to be dead. Your savior has gone to seek death. It was useless. No matter how Deer Cry Fruit shouted, Lioli didn't move. In the tunnel, Qin Guang's soul was struck by the power of lightning again and again. However, it was restored by the power of the Holy Grail again and again. Just moving forward in the tunnel felt like he had died thousands of times. Fortunately, although the process was extremely painful, he was still the noble master of the Holy Grail. He couldn't really die here. Thanks to his long and arduous training in the realm of cups, he had rich experience with this kind of fake death that was similar to online games. Anyway, no matter how painful it was, he wouldn't really die, so he didn't have much fear in his heart. The closer he got to the end of the tunnel, the stronger the aura emanating from the realm of fate became. It made every step forward more difficult, and the frequency at which his soul was struck by lightning increased. As a special realm of cups that didn't belong to the 9 heavens, the realm of fate was obviously not as obedient as the other realms of cups created by the Holy Grail. It was also particularly unfriendly towards Qin Guang, the master of the Holy Grail. Fortunately, the Holy Grail was slightly stronger. The speed at which it healed Qin Guang's soul was always faster than the speed at which it destroyed it. Finally, after walking in this long tunnel for perhaps 10 years or perhaps 100 years, when Qin Guang was about to completely lose the concept of time, he once again stood at the end of the tunnel. Taking a deep breath, he raised his head and looked forward. Through the barrier in front of him, he saw the indomitable bell of destiny slowly rotating in the air. Mysterious runes were flickering as the bell of destiny rotated. Every single talisman seemed to represent a type of energy of destiny. They were born invisibly and dissipated into nothingness, and they suffused into space. They imperceptibly controlled the destinies of countless living beings. Countless existences that resembled both immortals and humans flew toward the bell of destiny. Halfway there, they landed on the ground and began to stagger. With every step they took, they kowtowed as if they were worshipping with the utmost sincerity. It wasn't just these humanoid creatures. Even the large and petite exotic beasts and flying beasts were doing the same thing. They kept moving forward, and with every step they took, they seemed to be tempered and tested by the bell of destiny. The power of the giant bell exerted a terrifying pressure on them, but at the same time, it was helping them become stronger. When the pressure exerted by the bell of destiny exceeded the limits of their endurance, they would be sent flying. When they were fully prepared again, they would appear under the bell of destiny and attack it once more. The entire realm of destiny was born because of the bell of destiny. Since the day these living beings were born in the realm of destiny, they had an indelible and devout faith in this giant bell from the depths of their souls. The reason they cultivated and strengthened themselves was to get closer to their only God, the sacred bell that they spoke of. Looking at this scene, Qin Guang didn't know how to describe his feelings. The immortals and exotic beasts in the realm of destiny seemed to be extremely powerful, but compared to the incomplete souls in the Sea of Transient, they were really no different. The bell of destiny seemed to bestow them with power, but wasn't it also holding them tightly in the palm of its hand? No matter how powerful these people became, they couldn't break free from the threads of destiny that bound them. Their power would eventually become the most fundamental energy of the realm of destiny and be controlled by the bell of destiny. They would become the arms of the giant bell that controlled the destinies of all living beings in the myriad worlds. Fortunately, I am the owner of the transcendent Holy Grail. No matter how powerful this realm of destiny is, it is only one of the 3,000 worlds that I have. Now lend me a strand of your power. Qin Guang's eyes narrowed and he suddenly took a step forward. He stretched out his palm and directly broke through the barrier in front of him and reached inside. In the void of the realm of destiny, a giant silhouette of a palm suddenly appeared, but this palm was even larger than the Kun Ping. Roar. Just like last time, all the living beings in the realm of destiny immediately noticed this uninvited guest, and they all turned their heads to glare angrily at this hand. Not only that, but the bell of destiny also let out a buzzing sound. It was enraged by this fellow who had disturbed its slumber time and time again. The sound of the bell of destiny made all the living beings in the realm of destiny even more furious. Countless immortals and strange beasts flew up from the ground and pounced on the silhouette of light condensed from Qin Guang's palm. Ray after ray of dazzling light bombarded Qin Guang's silhouette of light, shattering it into pieces and showing signs of disintegration in an instant. Qin Guang felt as if his palm had been placed into a pot of boiling oil. These fellows were as small as ants compared to his hand, and their magical weapons were so small that they could be ignored. However, they were as numerous as the hairs on a cow, and their attacks came wave after wave, sticking to his hand like boiling oil, destroying his silhouette of light layer by layer. Fortunately, the power of the Holy Grail constantly appeared out of thin air and poured into his spiritual body, constantly healing his injuries. Otherwise, his hand would have really melted. He tried to grab it with his hand, but he couldn't catch anything. The bell of destiny didn't respond to his summons and sent him a wisp of the power of destiny. Instead, it kept exerting pressure on him in an attempt to drive him away. Last time, Lori was able to succeed, perhaps because she used her status as a divine emperor to negotiate with the bell of destiny, or perhaps because the conditions for mobilizing the power of destiny for the first time weren't as harsh as now. This spiritual bell seemed to be very willful today. If a tiger doesn't show its might, you'll really think it's a sick cat. The one in front of you is your master. Qin Guang dashed forward and his body completely broke through the barrier and stood completely in the realm of destiny. When he first entered the realm of destiny, his body was actually the same size as the bell of destiny, and he stood on the ground while his head reached the sky. However, his foundation was still too shallow, and he didn't last long before the pressure exerted by the bell of destiny caused his spiritual body to shrink. His body quickly returned to the size of an ordinary person, and he was about the same size as those ordinary immortals flying around him. Qin Guang tried to move his fingers, but he found it extremely difficult to do so. He even involuntarily floated backward as if he was about to be pushed back into the tunnel by the bell of destiny. Chapter 7:18. Outsider. Die. A sword-wielding celestial maiden screamed as she threw a flying sword at him. You damned freak. A huge man over 3 meters tall with a heavy hammer in his hand threw a flying hammer at Qin Guang. Roar. This was a Qilin beast that stood on colorful clouds. As it roared, a terrifying energy shot out from its mouth. The Kun Ping with a wingspan of tens of thousands of kilometers took on a human form. It had an eagle beak and peacock plume on its head, and it waved a colorful light that swept toward Qin Guang. Even further away there were countless natives of the realm of life flying over. All of them had ferocious looks on their faces, and all of them were filled with hatred. This bell was indeed not easy to ring. If Lily were here, she might be able to kill these rascals in an instant if she used her divine emperor true body. However, Qin Guang really did not know what to do. He gritted his teeth and used a stupid method. He released the power of the Holy Grail behind him like a rocket, and then he forced himself to charge forward. Get lost. No matter how these fellows attacked him, Qin Guang could not be bothered to retaliate. In any case, the power of the Holy Grail could heal his injuries. Thus, in this vast and almost boundless realm of life, his spiritual form turned into a meteor and crashed into the bell of fate. No matter how furious and crazy the natives of the realm of life were, they could not stop him at all. Anyway, you can't kill me. Even if you scatter me, I will still charge forward even if I turn into dregs. What really troubled and pressured Qin Guang was not the attacks of these natives, but the constant pressure from the bell of fate. The closer he got, the stronger the pressure from the bell of fate. At this time he was in a spiritual form and his body was not stable. Halfway through his flight, his body had already shrunk to about a meter tall. Stop him. Quick, stop him. Don't let him get close to the holy bell. Disperse this intruder. The roars of the aboriginals rose and fell. There was even an existence known as an immortal sovereign wearing golden armor that stood before Qin Guang, trying to use his body to block Qin Guang's advance. However, it was useless. At this moment, Qin Guang's body was further compressed, turning into a round ball the size of a ping pong. Although the pressure on him was increasing, his speed was getting faster and faster under the power of the Holy Grail. He pierced through the golden-armored immortal venerable's chest. These so-called immortals and strange beasts cultivated the power bestowed upon them by the Bell of Destiny. Qin Guang, on the other hand, possessed the power of the Holy Grail, which gave him an innate advantage in terms of power. How could they stop Qin Guang, the so-called outsider, who was actually the master of their holy bell? Gradually, Qin Guang became smaller and smaller, from a ping-pong ball to a glass bead, then to a mung bean and then to a sesame seed. The smaller his body, the stronger and sharper his spirit body. Even though he was in his spirit body state in terms of hardness, he was at least thousands of times harder than the hardest diamond on earth. It didn't matter if it was the golden-armored immortal sovereign, the silver-armored immortal king, the Qilin, the golden-winged rock, or the black tortoise, it was useless. Finally, Qin Guang rushed to within 1,000 miles of the Bell of Destiny, and the natives in the Realm of Destiny could no longer stop him. Even the most powerful natives couldn't get within 1,000 miles of the Bell of Destiny. Just like that, he turned into a speck of dust and crashed into the Bell of Destiny. Dong! A loud sound rang out and the Realm of Destiny shook. The sound of the Bell of Destiny resounded throughout the world, and the natives who were still excited just a second ago fell to the ground. As for Qin Guang, he flew back. It's time for him to leave. A wisp of invisible power of destiny was bitten into the mouth of the speck of dust. Qin Guang. With my spirit body I will shake fate, sound the bell and send you on your way. With a bang, Qin Guang fell out of the space-time tunnel and slammed into Cloud City. Liuli was still meditating as if she didn't notice the drastic change. Qin Guang didn't disturb her anymore. After resting for an entire day in Cloud City, he pulled the fate power in his hand, which was much thicker than the last time, and left the Realm of Destiny in the cup. At the moment when Qin Guang's figure completely disappeared, Liuli suddenly opened her eyes, and a smug smile appeared on her face. Brat, you only know how to squeeze me every day. It's time for you to experience more wind and rain. Sister Liuli, you're pretending? Lu Mingwen noticed Liuli's smile. Liuli replied tiredly, half of it is pretending and the other half is real. In his current situation I really can't help much. Other than ringing the Bell of Destiny, there really isn't a second choice. Then what about the Realm of Punishment? Lu Mingwe asked worriedly. Liuli nodded at first, then shook her head. It's fine. Although the Heavenly Holy Grail is only in the one-line Heaven's realm, between the two of us, one has fused with the soul of the Holy Grail, and the other has fused with the body of the Holy Grail. We can protect him. It's just that he has to suffer a lot, right? Lu Mingwe said with some schadenfreude. Liuli nodded. Of course, only by suffering the most difficult of all can one become a god of gods. How can it be so easy to be the master of the 3,000 worlds? Only someone as thick-skinned as him would be able to withstand it. Less than 5 seconds had passed since Qin Guang returned to the modern realm. In the eyes of Sun Xiaoxuan, who was beside him, he was only slightly dazed when he raised the cup to drink water. It was just a little strange. Why did he become so dispirited after being dazed for a while? Qin Guang didn't have the mood to talk to Sun Xiaoxuan, but closed his eyes and silently chanted in his heart. F***ck off. Go die. Scum who dares to hijack my plane. Go to hell. I curse you to have a heart attack. Gout attack. Even if you don't have a heart attack, go die. Even if you don't have gout, go die with epilepsy, or else I curse you to be allergic to peanut milk. Go die. Well, in fact, he didn't know how to use this power of destiny. After coming out, the mysterious power completely disappeared, so he didn't know how this thing worked. He was afraid that the Holy Grail and the power of destiny didn't understand his intentions, so he created this honey curse. After waiting for a few minutes, intensive gunshots came from the cockpit again. The honey curse worked. The guy who hijacked the plane is going to be cursed to death. Bastard. Why are you still alive? Bang. Fako. Marashi. Bang bang bang. The following 3,000 words were omitted. Anyway, it was a fierce gunfight, all kinds of thrills, all kinds of excitement, and all kinds of special effects. After waiting for another 3 or 4 minutes, with a click, the cockpit door finally opened. Covered in blood, the captain stood in front of the door, clutching his chest. Looking at the few Pan Am flight attendants in front of him, he shed 2 lines of tears. I killed them. I tried my best. I'm sorry. Tell Elsa that Dad loves her. Dad didn't let her down. Dad is a hero. As the middle-aged captain spoke, he slowly collapsed and his heart slowly stopped beating. He was shot at least 5 times and he was dead. But he did his duty as a captain. He didn't die after being shot twice, but passed out because of the pain. As if he felt the call of destiny, he woke up again. He remembered his wife who died on September 11th. With his last will, he didn't want his plane to be completely hijacked by terrorists like the plane in that tragedy. He picked up the gun on the ground and fought with Murashi and the other 2 criminals until the last moment. Qin Guang also rushed to the cockpit door. Seeing the resolute captain fall in a pool of blood, he clenched his fists. Dude, you won't die in vain. You are indeed a great warrior. Chapter 719. Oh no. Captain Frank. Wake up. Wake up. Oh my God. Oh my God. It's over. What should we do now? When the captain closed his eyes completely, there was a sudden wail in the aisle. The Pan Am flight attendants were in despair. Their sadness was beyond words. Standing to the side, Qin Guang could only watch on helplessly. Fine, it's definitely not a happy thing to witness the death of a martyr. But it's still a good thing that the danger has been resolved. Don't be like this. The dead are already dead and we still have to live on. It's over. It's all over now. At this moment, the flight attendant who had been talking to Qin Guang suddenly covered her face and knelt down, crying bitterly. Hey, what's wrong? Qin Guang patted her on the shoulder. Don't be like this. We have to be strong. Captain Frank's daughter is called Elsa, right? Is she still a student? It's okay. I'll be responsible for her tuition. No, Mr. Qin, that's not the problem. The flight attendant shook her head and said, now Captain Frank has been sacrificed. We just went in and saw that all the crew members were sacrificed. We only received the most basic piloting training. Now no one can fly a plane. Qin Guang was dumbfounded. This problem was really terrifying. Although the pilot did not seem to be particularly important in the process of automatic cruising, once there was an emergency takeoff and landing, how could they fly without a pilot? Although the current autopilot system was intelligent, it should not have evolved to the extent that it could completely replace the pilot. It was a little too unlucky. When it rains, it pours. Not long after, the purser came back with something that looked like a remote control with a worried look on her face. Everyone come here. She gathered all the flight attendants together. Qin Guang also went over, but there were 2 other flight attendants who went to the cockpit to stop them. The tone they used was more or less the same. They said that the criminals had been killed and everything was under control. Everyone should not panic and please sit in your seats and not move around. Although the passengers at the back were skeptical, there was no point in continuing to make a fuss, so they really settled down. Qin Guang also went to the door to maintain order. After all, he regarded himself as the victim and felt that he should do his part. Alright, everything's fine now. What's the situation now? Purser, please tell us. I'm the director of the Wuxia Special Affairs Bureau, the most outstanding special agent in Wuxia. I can think of a solution to any problem. I'll get through this together with everyone. After helping maintain order and comforting Sun Xiaoxuan, Qin Guang decided to brag a little so that the flight attendants would have some confidence and not be so tired from looking at him. Now we have 3 very serious problems. First, Deputy Captain Murahi set the plane's autopilot to a very strange place in West Asia. It should be the Ioha base that they mentioned just now. Deputy Captain Murahi destroyed the communication device, so we can't ask for help. He also encrypted the system a second time. I'm afraid we can only continue to fly to Ioha. Qin Guang's eyelids twitched. This problem was indeed serious. Second, we no longer have professional pilot training and certified staff on the plane. Even if we can find a way to change the course, I'm afraid we won't be able to land safely. Qin Guang nodded repeatedly. The purser was right. This problem was also quite serious. Of course, considering the third point, the 2 points I mentioned before have become very irrelevant. Qin Guang was overjoyed. This purser was so annoying. She must be deliberately pretending to be weak. She must be a very good flying instructor. And she must have a way to change the course. She was deliberately teasing everyone. Come, purser, I'll allow you to show off in front of me. Quickly tell me your story so that I can look at you with adoration. Third, everyone look at the remote control in my hand. I found it in Malahi's palm just now. He seems to have pressed the button. I'm guessing that this thing must be controlling a time bomb. So we don't have to worry about flying to Ioha or landing. In a few minutes it should explode. The purser tried hard to control her voice, trying to make herself appear calmer. But it was useless. As she spoke, she suddenly squatted down and burst into tears. When the purser cried, the others were not much better off. Suddenly there was a lot of wailing. No matter who it was, when they realized that they only had a few minutes left to live, they could not calm down. Even the most well-trained people could not do it. At that moment, Qin Guang felt as uncomfortable as if he had eaten a fly. He had entered the realm of life to ring the bell of destiny for the second time, and finally cursed the hijackers to death. But before he could close his mouth, he encountered another bomb. Wasn't this a little too much? Was he too faded with things that could explode in the past few days? A few days ago he met Nicosia Terpester. She was a walking self-destruct. But last night he encountered Hamid and the other 2 bombs. In the end he relied on Lioli and Popcorn 5S to survive. Why was he here again today? How tiring. I forget it. You can put your phone in the cup. At that moment, Lioli's voice finally sounded in his heart. It had only been a day, but when Qin Guang heard it, he felt as if it was the sound of nature. He was so moved that tears welled up in his eyes. Madame Lioli, I knew you wouldn't give up on me. Cut the crap. I don't have much time. Lioli's voice became softer and softer. Qin Guang had encountered situations one after another. She was the one who suffered. She forced Qin Guang to ring the bell of destiny to save himself, but she also left behind a bomb. There was nothing she could do. She had no choice but to exhaust herself. Lioli felt like she had become a sponge. There was always water in her stomach. It seemed like she had been squeezed dry, but if she twisted it hard, there would always be water. Poor Nicosia Terpester. She was drifting aimlessly in the pitch-black nothingness, feeling this life that was so long that it made people despair. She pondered over this strange way of living and searched for the true meaning of life. Before she could find an answer to these thousands of questions in her heart, she was grabbed by Lioli again. Do you want to understand the meaning of living? Lioli appeared in front of her once again. Hey goddess. I know. Defusing a bomb, I know. Nicosia Terpester waved her hand impatiently. No, she might not even have a hand right now. She was just a soul drifting in the nothingness. Chapter 720. Outside, Qin Guang quietly placed his phone into the Holy Grail, then patted the purser's shoulder. Now let's discuss the flight route. You don't have to worry about the bomb. How is that possible, sir? I just used the mysterious power from the east. I already know where they hid the bomb. I'm going to find the bomb now and dismantle it. If you really don't want to die, then be more diligent. Ask the passengers if they know how to fly a plane. Desperate times called for desperate measures. Qin Guang was not interested in explaining to these people how he found the bomb. He just wanted them to know the result. Sir, is what you said true? This is impossible, right? Mr. Qin, we know you are comforting us. Thank you, you are a good person. However, you should go back to your seat and find a way to leave a will for your family. Obviously, no one really took Qin Guang's Eastern power seriously. Now was not the time to get excited. Otherwise, someone would have already started scolding him. Can't you see that we are so desperate that we want to kill ourselves? What kind of situation is this, and you still have the mysterious power? Do you think you are Iron Man, Stark, or Thor? At the last moment of her life, the purser was still hesitating. Should she tell the others about this? The passengers did have the right to know, but she did not know how long it would take for the bomb to explode. If she told the others about this, would it cause panic among the passengers? Would it make things worse? As for the mysterious power that Qin Guang mentioned, she just treated it as a joke. At this time, the other people's reactions were similar to the purser's. The flight attendant who spoke a little more to Qin Guang in the first-class cabin asked doubtfully, "Mr. Qin, can you really do it?" Qin Guang smiled very handsomely and nodded. "Of course, no problem. Would I joke around with my life? Can you open the warehouse?" "Yes." "Alright, come with me to the warehouse." After that, Qin Guang led the flight attendant back to the first-class cabin. When he passed by Sun Xiaoxuan, he patted her shoulder and said, "Have a good sleep. When you wake up we will be home safe and sound." Sun Xiaoxuan didn't know where Qin Guang's confidence came from, but she had a blind, almost superstitious worship for Qin Guang. She nodded heavily and said, "Yes." The other passengers in the cabin also came over, wanting to ask him about the situation. Qin Guang was not in the mood to chat with these people. He just walked to the economy class at the back and said, "Everyone please make way. The crisis has been resolved. Everything is as usual." "Yes, that's right. Everyone please make way. We need to check the warehouse." The two of them came to the door of the warehouse and the flight attendant tried to enter the password. Fortunately, the robber Murahi had not changed the password of the warehouse. After entering the door, Qin Guang went straight to a corner and opened the box that was blocking it. A small black leather suitcase was lying there quietly. "That's it." Qin Guang swallowed his saliva. Although Lu Li had helped to prevent the bomb from exploding, such a big thing was enough to make one's hair stand on end just by looking at it. When Qin Guang picked up the bag and unzipped it, revealing the timer and the bomb inside, the Pan Am flight attendant who came with him gasped and finally believed his words. "How on earth did you do it?" She almost thought that the bomb was planted by Qin Guang. Otherwise, there was no way to explain why this person had the confidence to come straight here and take out such a terrifying thing. "How I did it is not important. Tell us how we should throw it out now. Now that there is an ocean below us, we can just throw it, right?" "Of course. But we have to call the purser over." The two of them waited for more than a minute and the purser finally ran over, panting. She was a little incoherent. "Sir, oh Mr. Qin, you must have been sent by God to save us." Qin Guang waved his hand impatiently. "Stop talking nonsense. There is only a minute left on the timer. If you dilly-dally any longer we will really have to go see God together." Okay, sir. Follow me." 30 seconds later, Qin Guang finally threw the unlucky bomb into the waste channel. Together with several flight attendants, they watched the black box fall straight down through the monitor. They breathed a long sigh of relief. They were safe for a short while. Everyone imitated his actions, patting their chests as if thanking the heavens and earth. "By the way, have you found anyone who can fly the plane? Also, what should we do about the flight route?" Qin Guang did not forget that the poor plane was cruising automatically to Ioha at the moment. The purser's face turned pale. "I've asked all the passengers just now. No one knows how to fly the plane." "Well, forget it. Please give me 2 parachutes. Let's say goodbye here. It's better to miss each other than to see each other. We can still be friends in the next life." "Sir, we don't have parachutes." "What? Not even the flight crew?" "Yes, no. At our current altitude it's the stratosphere outside. It's impossible to parachute. This is also a pressurized cabin. We really don't have the conditions for parachuting. The flight crew doesn't have parachutes either. Aviation ethics also don't allow the flight crew to have parachutes." "Sai, does that mean we're still doomed?" "In a sense, yes." "What the hell?" Qin Guang cursed. "Lu." Before he could finish cursing in his heart, Liuli looked as if she wanted to quit. "Shut up. I can't take it anymore. I really can't take it anymore. Good luck. Goodbye. Thank you. I'll die in front of you. Die. The sooner you die, the sooner you can reincarnate. The sooner you die, the sooner you can reincarnate." "I really can't do anything this time." After that, Liuli really didn't say anything. Qin Guang was in a daze. He said to the flight attendants, "You guys try to find another way. If it really doesn't work, I'll do it." "But you don't know how to fly a plane, do you?" the purser said doubtfully. Qin Guang didn't rush to answer her. Instead, he sank his mind into the world in the cup. He pinched his fingers and calculated. After the deering flower grew and bore deering fruit last time, the production of several world in the cup that had already been maxed out had increased again. It actually directly increased from 44,466 to 51,818. Now, the daily production of faith value had reached 300,000, and the production rate was about 12,600 per hour. After training the pectoral major until now, he had saved another 580,000 faith value. That was to say, as long as he waited for less than 2 hours, he would be able to gather enough faith value for a beggar version of the world in the cup for pilot special training. It was time to show his real skills. He suddenly felt confident and snorted. It doesn't matter whether I can fly a plane or not, but I'll be able to in a while. This lady, I'll emphasize for the last time. Don't doubt my ability. If I say I can do it, I can do it. Now you immediately find a way to change the route. Chapter 721. Didn't you hear what I said? Qin Guang glared angrily. He finally lost his temper after being questioned by the flight attendant woman again and again. At this point, the people on the plane had no other choice but to believe him. Well, Mr. Qin, it seems that we really have no other choice. Qin Guang shrugged. I hope to restore contact with the ground and let them remotely control the plane to land. I'm also afraid of death. If I had a choice, I wouldn't want to take on such a heavy responsibility. The so-called heroes were divided into two types. One was to become a hero for their beliefs and ideals, and the other was like Qin Guang, who was forced to do something beyond his abilities. Miss Sun, aren't you going to follow Mr. Qin? The young musician sitting in front of Qin Guang and Sun Xiaoxuan also noticed that something was wrong. Qin Guang seemed to have become the backbone of all the surviving staff on the plane unknowingly. Although the situation was getting better, it still seemed that danger was lurking everywhere. The flight attendants all looked solemn. At this point, he had forgotten that Qin Guang had looked down on Kleiderman just now. He only treated the strongest man in the world as a superman. With such curiosity, he took the initiative to ask Sun Xiaoxuan, who had been sitting calmly in his seat. In his opinion, this girl was not an ordinary person. Although there was no large-scale commotion among the passengers in the first-class cabin at this time, whether it was the successful businessmen, the pot-bellied officials, or the fashionable and handsome celebrities, these people all had lingering expressions of anxiety on their faces. Only this girl that was with Qin Guang stood out from the rest. She looked like a student, but she wasn't afraid at all. Her calmness was simply admirable. Sun Xiaoxuan smiled. Why should I follow him? He's doing business. Aren't you afraid at all? The young musician widened his eyes in disbelief and asked. Sun Xiaoxuan tilted his head and looked at him in confusion. Why should I be afraid? Was there any use in being afraid? It wouldn't change the current situation. If I stuck to him like a dog's skin plaster, it would only bring him trouble and get in his way. Since he said that he would let me go back alive, I believe that he can do it. If it was someone else, they would definitely succumb to the fear in their heart when everyone was in such a desperate situation. They would only want to stay with the people closest to them. Even if they were to die, they wanted to die together. However, Sun Xiaoxuan was different. She knew what was right and what was wrong in this situation. She also knew that the best choice for her was to sit here and wait for Qin Guang to solve all the problems. Unless Qin Guang needed her help, she would stand up and do whatever Qin Guang needed her to do. She didn't realize how special she was, but the young musician in front of her did. No wonder you're friends with Mr. Qin. For some reason, he seemed to have been infected by Sun Xiaoxuan's words and gradually calmed down. Sun Xiaoxuan's mood seemed to have been influenced by him for some reason. Since I'm here, I'll take things as they come. Whether it's life or death, it's all fate. I'll just accept it. At this time, Qin Guang sat back down and chatted with Sun Xiaoxuan for a while before sitting alone in the cockpit. The beggar's version of the world in a cup would take at least an hour and 40 minutes. It was useless to be impatient now. He might as well take advantage of this time to learn more about piloting the plane from the purser. He would at least be able to recognize the functions of some buttons. As for the cruising route, he had already figured it out. When he learned how to pilot a plane, he might try to destroy the computer center and switch to manual mode. The problem of the automatic cruising route would naturally be solved. After all, this was a huge plane with a high level of modern technology. He didn't know how difficult it would be to pilot it in manual mode. After all, he was only one person. It was a bit difficult to think about it. Forget it. Don't worry about those details. I have to believe in the professionals of the world in a cup. When I master it, I will be the strongest in the world. My electric car will also be able to run like a Harley-Davidson. A civil airliner will be a piece of cake. The other flight attendants began to walk around the cabin again. Compared with before, these flight attendants were much calmer and no longer panicked. They hoped to find a hacker among the passengers and try to crack the plane's built-in security system to change the cruising route. But they couldn't directly tell the seriousness of the situation. Even Qin Guang asked if there was a parachute on the plane. There must be many other passengers on the plane who had the same idea. In the claustrophobic cabin, facing a situation where they might not survive, the dark side of human nature was likely to be magnified infinitely in an instant. Maybe it only needed a small opportunity. Before, everyone thought they were going to die, so they might have been relatively casual when dealing with these things. But once there was a chance to survive, the flight attendants immediately became serious and professional. So they told a small lie when asking the passengers. They lied that Qin Guang had a very skilled pilot experience. With him in charge, the crisis had basically been completely resolved. Now they only needed a computer service staff to assist in the operation. The reason why Qin Guang didn't sit next to Sun Xiaoxuan in the first-class cabin but sat alone in the cockpit was to cooperate with the flight attendants' white lie. But unfortunately, until they finished asking the last passenger in the economy class, they still couldn't find an expert who could crack the route. The plane still flew straight to Ioha. Mr. Chen, I'm sorry. There's really no one who can help. The chief flight attendant reported the news to Qin Guang in frustration. Qin Guang sighed and turned his head to look at the dense buttons and digital screens on the console. Well, what he had just learned was basically in vain. I'm afraid I can only use manual mode? I'm afraid it's very difficult. According to our previous experience, manual mode is usually only used in very extreme situations. After all, at least 2 or 3 pilots are required to complete it. There are too many aspects to control on the plane. The chief flight attendant's tone became more and more dejected. The hope of survival that had gradually been ignited was gradually extinguished. She initially thought that Qin Guang had some foundation in flying. After all, his words of "don't doubt my ability" sounded domineering and powerful. In the end, that fellow nearly mistook the button to open the cabin door for ejection, which caused the chief flight attendant's mental breakdown. Does your civil aviation have ejection start? Well, maybe he really is a genius. After all, the director of the CIA also knows how to fly a plane. It's not impossible that the director of the Special Affairs Bureau of China is a monster. They are at the same level. But now he still needs to pilot it manually. Isn't that too much? Also, why did he insist on waiting for 2 hours? What's the principle behind it? I only know a very superficial thing. Can he learn to fly by lying in the pilot's chair and meditating like this? Isn't that ridiculous? At this moment, there was a sudden rustling sound from the communicator. After losing contact with the ground command for nearly half an hour, the passenger plane that had disappeared into thin air finally regained some contact with the human world. Not only were the people on the plane working hard, but the aviation command center on the ground was also trying everything possible to restore contact. They may have activated some kind of safety protection mechanism remotely, and they finally succeeded. Calling DL 199333. Calling DL 199333. This is China Airlines Command Center. The chief flight attendant immediately picked up the communication, and Qin Guang also became alert. However, about 10 minutes later, everyone sighed. The situation did not seem to have improved much. It was nothing more than having one more person to chat with. Although the co-pilot did not completely destroy the communication system, he had completely cut off the remote control port. Even the backup port was not spared. At present, the only thing that could be connected was the emergency communicator, but it was useless. They could not change the course or take over the plane. Everyone, don't give up hope. We will do everything we can to save the lives of DL 199333 and all the passengers on the plane. We also have the most professional pilots on standby. As long as you can completely follow our instructions during the landing, your chances of survival are very high. The voice of the middle-aged man on the communicator said some very meaningless words. Qin Guang curled his lips, thinking that it would be more useful to tell a joke to make me happy. The chief flight attendant also played along. Thank you. If you can come up with any ideas, we will do our best to cooperate. Okay, now the fuel on the plane can last for about 10 hours. You will arrive at the preset destination in about 7 hours, leaving us with plenty of time. The ground command center on the communicator got some good news from the plane. After all, Qin Guang was less than an hour and a half away from the next beggar's world in the cup. In the following period of time, the two sides maintained communication. As the new pilot who volunteered, Qin Guang was taught some basic flight knowledge through the communicator. The chief flight attendant cooperated with him the whole time. Although everyone felt that this was actually a meaningless struggle, who would want to give up until the last moment? Anyway, I don't care what you do. Qin Guang must not die. At this time, in a large courtyard in Yanjing, several old men were glaring at the person in charge of Wuxia Airlines and roaring. This earth-shattering event finally reached the ears of this group of old men. At that time they were so scared that they jumped out of their chairs. They temporarily interrupted the large-scale meeting and focused on investigating this matter. The one who made this roar was Old Man Jiang. His fists were clenched tightly and the veins on his forehead were popping. The other old men's faces were also extremely ugly. No one even dared to look at Old Man Jin's face. Chapter 722. Everyone knew that Grandfather Jin's granddaughter was tied to Qin Guang. Although Jin Shuiwei had a gentle personality, she was famous for being soft on the outside but tough on the inside. If Qin Guang died, the consequences would be unthinkable. Of course, what everyone was most concerned about was the Wen family's leader's opinion on this matter. All along, the two sides rarely communicated directly. Many things were maintained through Qin Guang as a link. The person who made Wen family's leader willing to side with the ruler was Qin Guang, the director of the Special Affairs Bureau. Otherwise, with the strength she displayed that day, even the new weapons might not be a threat to her. Without enough restraint and reason, why would she be willing to give up her privileges and let others control her? On their plane, is there really not a single pilot with experience? He had scolded them, but it was useless. The old man in the middle slowed down his tone and asked the person in charge of China Airlines again. The China Airlines representative on the screen confirmed with the staff next to him and helplessly replied, "Indeed, there is not a single pilot. Now Director Chen is undergoing emergency training. We can only hope that he can learn and apply what he has learned." How is that possible? Nonsense. Even if he is a civil aviation pilot without a long period of systematic training, it is impossible to complete a flight mission. What's more, the automatic control system on DL199333 is damaged. There is no ground crew to provide positioning and technical support. This is too difficult. Old Man Jean slammed the table and stomped his feet. The China Airlines representative nodded. This is not the worst situation. In fact, the plane's preset flight route is directly to a place called Ioha. That should be the terrorist organization's base. If we want to change the course, we can only switch the plane to manual operation mode. Only a half-baked pilot who was learning and applying what he had learned, and it had to be manual operation. The old men were silent for a moment. No matter how they thought about it, it was a scam. No one wanted to admit it, but in their hearts they were all thinking the same thing. This time it was really over. First, help us connect the communication. We want to talk to Qin Guang. The atmosphere in the conference room was extremely tense. The old man in the middle said so. On the other side, Qin Guang was almost dizzy from the cramming method of the flight instructor in the command center. There were so many instruments and the other party could not wait to explain 3 or 4 per second. It would be a miracle if he could remember them all. When he heard that the elders wanted to talk to him, he quickly nodded and asked them to switch. "Brother, although you have good intentions, you speak too fast. There are too many things that I need to remember and I don't have the ability to do that right now." The moment the communication was connected, old Zhang's voice came. "Little Qin, stay strong." "Okay, thank you. I've always been strong. Believe me. You can do it." This was old Jin's encouragement. Sure, no problem." Qin Guang acknowledged. After exchanging a few words, Qin Guang was almost convinced by the old men. He was calm, but the old men's tone was sorrowful. "How are you guys consoling me? You're clearly sending me on my way. Aren't you trying to comfort me? You're clearly sending me on my way. Well, actually, things might not be that bad. Thank you for your concern, but I'm fine." Qin Guang said tentatively. The old men were moved to tears. This young man was too strong, too great, too brave. In this world he was probably the only one who could still be so calm in such a desperate situation. And Qin Guang. Good job, young man. A real man should live as a hero and die as a hero. No matter what, we will take care of your family. Qin Guang, although it's good to be strong now that things have come to this, we have to prepare for the worst. Tell us if you have any unresolved thoughts in your heart. Don't worry, we're not asking you to say your last words. Well, it's better to be safe than sorry. The old man in the middle rarely made promises, but now that things had come to this, he felt that he needed to make more promises to Qin Guang. Old man Jin also said, Qin Guang, I've always treated you as my grandson-in-law. No matter what, from now on your family is also my family. I won't guarantee them a lifetime of glory and wealth, but peace and happiness will definitely not be a problem. Hey, old gentleman, which eye of yours saw that I've already ascended to heaven? You keep saying that it's not my last words, but why do I feel like something is wrong? Right, we've contacted sect leader Wen. Do you have anything else to say to her? At this moment, one of the old men in charge of communicating with the Special Affairs Bureau suddenly interrupted. The old men's intentions were clear to have Qin Guang talk to Wen at this time. They hoped that Qin Guang could at least stabilize sect leader Wen in the final moments of his life. The big picture was the most important. Although this was a very mundane way of thinking, this matter was of utmost importance. Alright, help me get through to her. But things really aren't that bad, old man. Although his heart was aching, he actually wanted to know what Wen would say to him in this situation. She would probably be scared half to death? Alright, this was actually quite interesting. Qin Guang knew what the old men were thinking, but he wasn't bothered by it. He immediately agreed to it and even comforted the old men in the process. Strong young man, you don't have to comfort us. We should be the ones comforting you. Then we'll first contact the 2 deputy directors of the Special Affairs Bureau of the 5 capitals. They'll be in charge of contacting sect leader Wen. Xin Qin and Wu Miaowan's soft sobbing could be heard from the communicator. Alright, those 2 girls also know about this. Brothers, in another hour or so the new and hottest strongest pilot will be born. Don't make it seem like we're going to be separated forever. As the old men spoke, Xin Qin's scream suddenly came from the other end. Bastard director. How could you do this? How could you leave me and little Miao Miao alone without saying a word? I haven't even learned the painting scroll, and I don't even understand what's going on with your bone structure. You bastard. You irresponsible bastard. Well, he did not hear Wenwen's voice, but was scolded by Xin Qin first. Hey, calm down. Calm down. I'm not dead yet, right? I'm still flying in the sky, aren't I? Don't quibble, don't comfort us, I know all about it. You're dead. Wu Miaowan's voice came from the side again. To be honest, those who know will think that you're comforting me, but those who don't know will think that you're cursing me. The old men in Yanjing listened and did not know whether to laugh or cry at Wu Miaowan's words. Were they really on the same side? Qin Guang did not even bother to roll his eyes. What kind of stinky mouth did these 2 girls have? Don't worry, although the situation looks terrible now, the plane is cruising on autopilot and it didn't explode. It's just a small matter, a small matter. It's just piloting a plane, what's the big deal? As soon as he finished speaking, the plane suddenly shook, and the alarm suddenly sounded in the cockpit. Qin Guang and the flight attendants swayed violently and they almost fell to the ground. *CK, is my mouth blessed or something? 10 seconds later, listening to the buzzing alarm in his ears, Master Guang looked at the shocking pile of red exclamation marks on the surveillance equipment that he could not understand, and felt a little uncomfortable. At this moment, the China Airlines person in charge's voice interrupted again. That the plane must have encountered an extreme cold wave just now, and the right-wing engine must have suffered a certain impact. And then, Qin Guang, the old men, and Xin Qin asked in unison. The China Airlines person in charge swallowed his saliva. The power has been damaged, and the autopilot has automatically increased its power to maintain speed and balance. The fuel consumption has increased, and with the plane's current fuel capacity, it can only hold on for another 3 to 4 hours before reaching Ioha. Of course, this is still a better situation. The right-wing engine also has the possibility of overloading and stopping at any time. The power parameters of the Canadian-made engine are... Wait, what you said is too professional, I don't quite understand. Make it simple, make it simple. To put it simply, the plane can lose an engine at any time and then lose balance, stalling and crash. It can also crash after 3 hours of fuel exhaustion. The China Airlines person in charge said dejectedly. Then what should we do now? Immediately switch to manual mode and then make an emergency landing. Qin Guang spread his hands. Save it. With my current standard, do you think I can make an emergency landing? Even if you give me the widest and largest runway, I can still crash into the ground. Do you believe me? No matter what, wait for me for an hour and a half. Also, it's the sea below us. Make an emergency landing? Does this plane have a gliding function? At this moment, everyone fell into silence. What Qin Guang said was correct, and the situation had truly worsened. At this moment, there was a commotion in the passenger cabin. Finally, someone could not sit still and ran over to see the situation. Qin Guang had no choice but to stand up with a straight face. Get out, get out. Just sit there obediently. Don't cause trouble. Sir, what was that vibration just now? I accidentally stepped on the brakes just now to test the performance. Huh. Brakes? Brake. Alright. Get out, get out. As Qin Guang spoke, he slammed the cockpit door shut. He was also upset. When it rains, it pours. When one is unlucky, they can't even drink water. The flight attendants in the cockpit cried again. All of you get out too. All of you get out. I'm so annoyed. Qin Guang chased all the flight attendants out, leaving only the chief flight attendant who had not cried yet to help out. After a long time, old Master Jin's voice came again. This time it was even sadder than before. The old master, who was used to all kinds of storms, actually had a sobbing tone. Wuxian, you have to be strong. In everyone's hearts, Qin Guang and the rest of the plane had officially entered a 3-hour death countdown. The atmosphere became more and more depressing and heavy. Everyone could not help but try to figure out what Qin Guang and the rest were feeling at this moment. How desperate and sad were they? Chapter 723. At this moment, Xen Qin suddenly shouted again without any rhyme or reason. Chief, hurry up and rub it. Qin Guang thought he had misheard. The old men did not react in time. After all, rub was a term used on the internet. The old men did not understand it very well. What did you just say? Qin Guang asked again. Xen Qin took a deep breath and shouted at the top of her lungs. Come. Rub. Are you crazy? Look at the situation now. Stop messing around. Qin Guang roared back with an even louder voice than her. Considering the identities of the participants, this might be the highest level conference in the country. With such a solemn occasion and tense atmosphere, can't you see that the elders are on the verge of tears? Can't you be more serious? I'm serious. Hurry up and put it in a bottle. It's best to throw it into the sea in a low-temperature insulated box. I'll set off now. I'll definitely find your bottle in the sea. Then I'll give you a child. Mother ***. I wanted to. Wu Miaowan said again. Hey, the old men are all listening. I have a clean relationship with you all. Don't make it sound like we're in a relationship. Don't cause trouble. When Qin Guang thought about how even old man Jin was listening to them, he was nearly driven insane by these two lolas. So awkward. No. Listen to me. I'm not talking nonsense. Chief, don't you realize how terrifying your talent is? Do you know how precious and rare a talent like yours is under the circumstances that you don't have to consider your comprehension ability? I watched the live broadcast of your match in Detroit. Don't you know how precious your arms are? That's right. Our chief is simply a weirdo in the history of human evolution. Every gene is a treasure. It's a disaster for mankind to burn them to ashes in the air crash. Wu Miaowan chimed in. Then she seemed to be talking to herself. I'm also a genius. If I can combine the chief's genes, how talented will the child be? Chief, don't give up on yourself. Hurry up and do it. For all of mankind. Qin Guang silently covered his face as he listened to the two kids, talking nonsense. He did not even have the strength to complain. Unexpectedly, after the initial awkwardness and bewilderment, the elders finally understood the meaning of the two little lolas and actually agreed with them. Qin Guang's victory in Detroit naturally attracted the attention of not only America's Special Department, but China also had their own thoughts. It's just that due to various reasons and Sect Master Wen's mood, It wasn't convenient for them to bring it up. Then again, Qin Guang was someone on their side to begin with, so there's no rush in this matter. When the time comes, it's not impossible for him to mention it. But now his plane crash was imminent and he only had a little more than 3 hours to live. In that case, the problem that the two little girls who were martial arts practitioners considered was indeed not to be taken lightly, even though the landing point was very strange. These two deputy chiefs of the Guang were talents. The younger generation will surpass the older. Little Qin, little Xian and the others are right. There are 3 ways to be unfilial, and having no descendants is the worst. If it's really possible, try it. This may be too much for the two little girls, but we will think of another way for you. Old Master Jean, you're also doing this. I will ask Shirua. If she agrees. Are you crazy? Shut up. I don't want to talk to you. Please help me get one. Can't I? Exin Qin and the old men said in the same regretful tone. Nonsense. Old Master, you were also led into the ditch by them, right? Can you be more serious? Can you let me say my last words properly? Okay. After a few seconds of silence, Wenwen's voice finally came. Qin Guang, if you die, I will kill all the people who directly or indirectly caused your death. I will help you keep an eye on your uncle and aunt. Okay, thank you. Also hurry up and do it. It was obvious that Wenwen had been listening for a long time. Her first sentence was concise and comprehensive, going straight to the point. Are you crazy? If it wasn't for the fact that this was an emergency call, Qin Guang would have hung up on the phone. This is life and death, can you please be more serious? Okay, I'll be serious. Please listen to me. I want to give birth to a child for you. You know me, no one else will be interested in me. I can't just live like this for the rest of my life. If you die, then forget it. Please leave something behind so that I can think of something. I won't die. I really won't die. I really have a way. But I really don't know how to explain it to you. Forget it. Anyway, I'm a righteous person. That's it. I'm hanging up. After a long time, Qin Guang turned to look at the purser and said in English, how do we cut this thing off? Can we still connect it if we cut it off? Mr. Qin, please don't. This is our only way to communicate with the outside world. The purser quickly tried to dissuade him. All right, then let's continue like this. Now I have to close my eyes and meditate. None of you believe me, but you can't go wrong by listening to me. I'll show you later that I'll become an ace pilot. After saying that, Qin Guang picked up his sleeves and ran to the side to find a small bed to lie down on. If he continued to sit in front of the communicator, he would either be force-fed, or he would be asked for essence. That was just too crazy. At this critical moment, he wasn't afraid of being rude in front of the elders. Anyway, in their hearts he was already a dead man. What's wrong with me being a little arrogant? In the end, Qin Guang was forced to lie down and act shamelessly. The other side only allowed him and the purser to listen in on a high-level meeting. The general meaning was that Wenwen and the elders had promised to uphold peace and hope that martial artists and ordinary people could live in harmony. This was what Qin Guang had always wanted. Even if something happened to Qin Guang, she was willing to maintain the current situation and work together to change things in a better direction. However, she wasn't completely unconditional. In general, she wanted Qin Guang's funeral to be of the highest standard. She also wanted Qin Guang's family to do whatever they wanted. Hearing this group of people discussing his funeral so happily, Master Guang gritted his teeth as he lay on the bed. However, he didn't really lie down for long before someone shouted at him to get off the bed. The command center quickly took over the call, and the intense last-minute force-feeding began again. At this moment, Qin Guang didn't want to listen to them for even a second. However, he had no choice. Everyone was depending on him and he had no choice but to put on an act. Thus, he could only mutter to his communicator to express that he was listening. After waiting for about half an hour, Wenwen and the others' meeting finally ended. Although Wenwen felt terrible, she wasn't a sloppy person. She ended the call after finalizing the matter. Perhaps she was already busy avenging Qin Guang. I say bro, take a break. Really, take a break. I feel like your throat is on fire when I listen to your voice over the phone. I really can't remember such complicated things in a short time. Listen to me. You must remember the key points. Once we get close to land, try to switch to manual mode and then try to change direction. We can roughly capture your position and movement route now. Thanks to the Big Dipper system, I'll try my best to cooperate with you and guide you to the nearest airport. When the time comes, you'll circle in the air. We'll think of a way to slowly bring the plane down. Reduce the power when you land. Don't rush it. Pull the nose up, Chief Chin. Where are you, Chief Chin? Sorry, I fell asleep. Chief Chin, be serious. At this moment, a crisp voice suddenly came from the communicator. Qin Guang, are you okay? How are you? Well, this was Jin Shuiwe. How did she know? I'm fine. My emotions are very stable. I'm trying to save myself. Qin Guang listened to her sobbing tone and felt his heart ache. He was really ashamed. The situation was not as bad as you think. As long as the engine didn't blow up. No, for an ace pilot, even if one engine blew up, they would still be able to glide and land. I know. I won't waste your time. I just want to tell you that I love you. You must survive. Jin Shuiwe only said one sentence. After all, she was a girl who knew the big picture. At such a special time, she was already completely satisfied that she could use her status and privilege to fight for the opportunity to say such a sentence. Thank you. I know. I won't die. Regarding the matter of Jin Shuiwe taking the initiative to pursue him, Qin Guang was actually deliberately avoiding it. After all, it wasn't easy to get rid of such a big scandal target. It was quite hard for him to live with the identity of Jin Shuiwe's boyfriend. But now he would respond to her a little. Anyway, in everyone's heart, his current situation was too miserable and terrible. Unexpectedly, just as Jin Shuiwe's voice disappeared, Jiang Yage continued. Qin Guang. You know what I'm thinking? I'm warning you, you can't die. Otherwise, I'll tell everyone in the world about it. You have to live well for me. The matter she was talking about should be referring to the time when she saw Qin Guang dressed as Qin Yu in Yanjing's Enoa Club. Qin Guang pressed his forehead and said weakly, all right. I already said I won't die. Sister Shuiwe and I will wait for you to come back together. As long as you can come back alive, you can do whatever you want. You understand? After Jiang Yage finished speaking, she fell silent. In the eyes of others, Qin Guang must be racing against time. The old men looked at each other, especially Old Master Jin and Old Master Jiang. They felt that something was wrong. Could it be that Yage also likes him? Old Master Jin said doubtfully. Old Master Jiang smacked his lips. Seems so. I watched her grow up, but I've never seen her speak to anyone in such a tone. Old Master Jin didn't point out one thing. After all, when Jiang Yage said, you can do whatever you want in front of everyone, the ambiguity was too deep. As old people, it was a little difficult for them to get used to it. Well, little Qin, as long as you can come back safely, we won't interfere in the affairs of you young people. Qin Guang, who was dealing with the command center, glared at him. Old man, you guys are really working hard to stimulate my potential. Well, Jiang Yage and it's okay, we don't blame you. Old Master Jiang interrupted him. Okay, let's not talk about it anymore. Hurry up and do the assault training. It's up to you. Qin Guang had no choice but to say, okay. Finally, after more than an hour of dawdling, when his brain was about to explode from the extremely enthusiastic instructors in the command center, he finally picked up his cup. It doesn't seem to be filled with water. Forget it, I'm learning to fly a plane anyway, it's better to leave it empty. I just don't know what the beggar version of pilot training will be like. Forget it, I'll deal with whatever comes my way anyway. Now that things have come to this, there's nothing to ask for. He focused his mind and sank into it. Liu Li was still sitting without any movement, but Qin Guang already had the experience of mobilizing the realm of life on his own. The move looked a little shameful and out of place, but it should be quite useful. He clenched his fists, curled up his body tightly, and then suddenly raised his arms and shouted, "Come on! Holy Grail! I want to learn to fly a plane." His roar echoed repeatedly in Cloud City, sounding soul-stirring and awe-inspiring. After waiting for several minutes, there was no movement. Maybe the posture was wrong, or maybe the momentum was not enough, so he did it again. Puff. Liu Li, who was meditating with her eyes closed, was finally amused by his simple and honest look. If you want to tell me that you are acting cute, then let me tell you, you have succeeded. Hey, don't make fun of me. I am very anxious now. Since you are awake, help me. Liu Li blinked and didn't talk nonsense. She raised her hand and Qin Guang's body floated up again. Qin Guang, who slowly disappeared in Cloud City, didn't notice that after he left, Liuli's figure suddenly became a little fainter. Sister Liuli, you worked too hard. Lu Minghua said with a heartache. Liuli smiled. I can't help it. Who asked me to meet him? Maybe after he withstood this for a while I really need to have a good rest. Let's wait a little longer. When the Holy Grail is upgraded to another level and reaches the 3rd level Cloud Elephant Sky, our situation will be much better. Lu Minghua sighed. On Qin Guang's side, he thought that he would be trapped in the armor like many times before, or he would be like the racing god training ground with only half an alto. However, after transforming in the world in the cup, he immediately found that this was not the case. As far as the eye could see, it was an endless starry sky, and the music he was familiar with rang in his ears. If he remembered correctly, it was probably the FC game he played when he was a primary school student more than 10 years ago. Little B. The more he looked at the starry sky, the more he felt that this was not a real starry sky but an 8-bit FC game. He wanted to look at his hand. Well, my hand has become a pillar. Now I am sitting in a mosaic small plane in Little B, right? No wonder it was the beggar version. This low-quality, low-sound, low-standard flying shooting game was really simple. At least give me Suruman Snake or Thunderbolt. Chapter 724. In the past, Qin Guang felt that half an alto was already the pinnacle of a small sparrow in a cup, but it had all the essentials. After all, although the interior of the unlucky alto was covered in mosaics, the soundtrack was retarded, and the road outside was even worse. The feel and control of the entire car was no different from a real car. This was not something that could be easily achieved. But today he found that he still underestimated the wit of the world in the cup. It was really scary, the mosaic of himself, the mosaic of the Little B plane. The instrument in front of him was completely the lowest end of the 8-bit game, but looking at it, the instrument was so complete. The feeling of flying was so real. No, these instruments seemed to be completely different from the civil aviation plane just now, and the cockpit was also very narrow. Could it be that this was a terrifying fighter plane? Just as he was thinking, the super simple electronic sound from the world in the cup finally came. First lesson of beginner flight tutorial. Qin Guang quickly raised his spirits and concentrated. He thought that this first lesson should let him familiarize himself with the performance of the fighter plane. More importantly, he should recognize the meaning of these instruments and how to use them, right? Please, Redeemer, eliminate the 50 green bees in front of you in 10 minutes. What the F***CK? The first lesson of your beginner flight tutorial is 1 against 50. Are you crazy? Can you tell me how to fly the plane first? As he was cursing in his heart, the green dots floating in the distant starry sky suddenly moved, making a buzzing sound and rushed in the direction of Qin Guang. Even though he was now a mosaic of a person sitting in the plane, the sound made by the 50 little bees in front of him was deafening. Seeing these damn things flying closer and closer, the new pilot Qin Guang was still in a daze. The result was, of course, no suspense. The green bees hit his mosaic plane and exploded with a bang. He said he was going to die without any hesitation. But perhaps because his whole body was turned into a mosaic, he almost didn't feel any pain when he was killed. It was really no different from playing a game. In addition, he also learned something that he didn't know, whether it was good or bad news. This time, the world in the cup actually had no resurrection limit. He could die as many times as he wanted to. Just thinking about it made him feel blessed. There was no risk of failing the mission at all. But after his resurrection, he quickly shed 2 lines of sad mosaic tears. This was a basket of good news. Didn't this mean that he would die very, very miserably? Beginner tutorial lesson 1, second time. Even counted. Finally, after being hit 17 or 18 times in a row, Qin Guang managed to get Mosaic's plane to move a little before it was hit. But it was of no use. The evil green bee turned around and accurately crashed into him. Beginner's tutorial, lesson 1, time 9837. Driving the mosaic plane nimbly through the green bees, he pressed the shooting button from time to time, letting the bayu on the tip of the red tip of the mosaic plane emit an electronic light, accurately hitting the last green bee. He finally completed the first lesson of the honey juice beginner tutorial. Is it finally the second lesson? Elementary Flight Tutorial Lesson 1 Section 2. Did the jungler have to be so meticulous? There was still a second lesson in the first lesson. Please Redeemer, eliminate the 55 green bees in front of you in 9 minutes. Next 60 small bees were eliminated in 8 minutes. Until the final 120 small bees were eliminated in 1 minute, he finally completed the rather painful first lesson of the beginner tutorial. Please eliminate 120 green bees and 10 purple bees in 1 minute. You are so boring. What was normal pilot training like? Qin had no idea. He also felt that what he was practicing now was definitely a super unreasonable wild way, but life was like this. Since he couldn't resist, he closed his eyes and enjoyed it. Although he seemed to be in the starry sky at this time, the feeling of flying the mosaic plane was really no different from piloting a fighter plane in the Earth's atmosphere. He didn't know what model the mosaic plane he was piloting at this time was, but there was no doubt that it was a very low-end thing. After all, the electronic equipment of this plane was too retarded. Whether it was pulling up or changing directions or even any small movements, it all required him to manually operate. Fortunately, the rich piloting experience from the racing god training ground, coupled with the Kirin arms and Aeolus legs, gave him super flexible and super useful limbs. It was very difficult to fly and shoot alone in the plane at the same time, but he slowly got used to it. The amazing thing was that although his hand looked like a fire stick, he could still feel the feeling of his 5 fingers touching the instrument when he was operating the instrument. The level of the small bees was getting higher and higher, from green to purple to red, and then gradually turned into the queen bee. The flying of the enemy bees was getting more and more flexible, and the attack method also changed from a simple collision to a crossfire line, or a high-speed collision, or the even more terrifying formation attack. He really didn't know how long it had been, at least a few years, but the beginner tutorial was finally over. The little mosaic figure in Mosaic's cockpit was so touched that it shed a mosaic tear. Advanced Flight Tutorial Lesson 1. Damn it, are you done? What the hell is an advanced version? Is it even beginner? Well, compared to the last time, it seemed that the instruments in the cockpit were not the same. The number and type of instruments had increased, but the control had become a little easier. It seemed that with the upgrade of the beginner tutorial, the plane had also been upgraded from a suspected World War I model to a World War II model. After the performance improvement of the plane, the biggest change brought to Qin was the load on the body during high-speed movements. Flying a plane was driving, and driving a car was also driving. On the surface it looked like driving a vehicle, but in fact, there was an essential difference between the two. A car would hardly disintegrate during a big maneuver, but it was different for a plane, especially a fighter plane. In the process of an intense firefight, it often had to make a variety of high-power and high-load maneuvers, such as sudden changes in direction, immense somersaults, vertical turns, Dutch rolls, and other difficult movements. If the intensity of these movements exceeded the endurance of the plane itself, it was even possible for the plane to disintegrate while flying. In addition, when a high-speed fighter plane engaged in an intense fight in the air, every big maneuver would cause an extremely terrifying load on the body of the fighter plane pilot. For example, black vision. When the fighter plane rapidly increased its G value, gravity would pull the human body's blood down, and the human body would continue to rush up along with the plane. This would cause the brain to be short of blood, and the vision would turn black and nothing could be seen. This was actually a sign of fainting. Conversely, there would also be a situation where a large amount of blood would flow into the pilot's head, and the pilot's eyeballs might even be squeezed out of their eye sockets, or cause intracranial hemorrhage. Every step of piloting a fighter plane was dangerous. First of all, a top-notch pilot must have a very good physical fitness, which could also be understood as acceleration endurance. Second, the pilot must have an accurate judgment of the limits of the plane and the pilot's own endurance. In a dogfight, the one who could maximize the performance of their own fighter plane, whose tactical strategy was the most correct, whose judgment was the most accurate, and who could survive to the end. True ace pilots, in addition to diligently studying and training, were all talented people. Because of their innate advantages, they could always touch the limits of the fighter plane in their own body. In an intense firefight where life and death was only a hair's breadth away, they could always laugh to the end. For example, Richard Bond had piloted the same type of fighter plane as others, but he participated in hundreds of aerial battles in World War II and survived, and in the end he shot down 27 enemy planes. Another ace pilot, the father of Soviet aerial combat, Pokrishkin, had shot down as many as 59 planes. Such a great disparity in results was precisely because of the unique talents of these ace pilots. They had a strong physique and an incomparably calm mentality. They could always use the shortest time to come up with the most correct strategy. Compared to ordinary pilots, their advantages were almost overwhelming. However, after going through the first stage of basic training, Qin Guang already had all of these elements. Although the special training for his entire body had not been completed, his physique had long since surpassed the scope of ordinary people. As for his psychological quality and judgment after dying countless times, even the weakest person should have trained it, not to mention that his psychological quality was not bad to begin with. In fact, it was super strong. The more one died, the less one was afraid. Something like judgment, to put it bluntly, was more of an accumulation of experience. The difference was that other pilots wanted to accumulate experience and had to fight with their lives. If they died, they could only wait for their next life to be reincarnated, but Master Guang said, "I have unlimited life." Although his opponent was Little B and did not look very serious, the graphics were also very crazy, and the accompaniment of the FC minigame was also very out of tune. But the greatest characteristic of the Heavenly Holy Grail was that no matter how much other aspects were reduced, the content related to special training would never be reduced. The control of this fighter plane was completely realistic. In the intense flight movements, the test of the performance of the fighter plane in the human body was also completely realistic. Even the feeling of the plane disintegrating due to excessive movements was completely realistic. As he flew, he felt like he was flying outside, his knees facing the breeze. It was simply refreshing. After switching to the World War II model, although the control had become simpler, the burden on the body was greater. However, as time passed, it seemed that his body's adaptability had gradually increased, and his acceleration endurance slowly increased through continuous flight. Finally, he waited for the new electronic notification from the Heavenly Holy Grail. Advanced version of Basic Flight Tutorial, First Lesson. Right, you win. After the advanced version came the advanced version. When would there be an intermediate version? Would there be an advanced version? Wait, the cockpit seemed to have become bigger. He looked carefully at the instrument and then tried to switch to manual mode to move the plane. Alright, this time even the model had been changed to become a bomber. There was actually no Bayu gun. Only airdrop bombs could be used to blow up little bees. Are you toxic? Isn't this game too difficult? Alright, I actually completed it again. I'm such a genius. Advanced version of Basic Flight Tutorial, First Lesson. You're already in the advanced version and you're still in the basic version. Are you crazy? Airbus A330-200? Switch to a modern model and it's a passenger plane. Isn't this the one outside now? What a considerate world in the cup. You want me to pilot a passenger plane to deal with those little bees in front of me? No weapons. I can only use the two wing blades that inexplicably grew out of the edges of the wings to cut them? You want me to pilot the plane as a Guan Yu? I actually did it. I'm such a genius. Qin Guang sat silently in the cockpit. Piloting such a large passenger plane in manual mode alone was simply insane. Even the supposedly tireless world in the cup made him unbearably tired. After successfully completing the advanced version, he didn't have the mood to be happy. Who knew what version of the basic version would be next? As for how long he had been piloting, he couldn't be bothered to calculate. At least a few hundred years. In this world in the cup, time was not even considered as time. Fortunately, his mind was protected by the power of the Holy Grail, or else only God knows how many times he would have gone crazy. When is this unlucky basic version ending? While he was complaining in his mind, his body suddenly trembled. The entire FC Little B starry sky quickly disintegrated. The A330 mosaic cockpit beside him also slowly turned into specks of stars and dissipated into the void. Is it finally going to end? Qin Guang looked at the endless void and thought so in his mind. Congratulations, Redeemer, you have completed the entire flying tutorial. After all this time, the basic version was all special flying training. Holy Grail, you liar. Next, please accept your graduation exam, Real Aerial Combat. As the voice faded, Qin Guang's vision blurred. He appeared in a completely black and white world. There was a buzzing sound in his ears. It was the roar of the engine. The glass cockpit's soundproofing was really not good. Even if his head was wrapped in a pilot's helmet, it still made a buzzing sound. Raising his head, Qin Guang looked around and gave full marks for the picture quality of the graduation exam. Although it was black and white, everything before him looked extremely realistic. It's just that there was a hazy feeling to it. Looking at the instrument, he should be piloting a very outdated small model. What kind of model is this? Where am I going now? What am I doing now? In this black and white world. Just as he was thinking about this, a large pile of information was suddenly shoved into his brain. It actually included all the aircraft models that had appeared in modern society from the day of the birth of the aircraft. From the functional parameters to the meaning of the control instruments, to the weapon loading, everything was there. The huge amount of knowledge was strangely forced into his brain by the Holy Grail. There was no difficulty in the technical aspect. All he had to do was memorize it. The Holy Grail was also lazy. It just made his brain swell and hurt badly. After a few minutes, he slowly came back to his senses, and once again dug his brain to search for memories. These memories that originally did not belong to him, it was not very convenient to mobilize them. He could not achieve what he thought. He had no choice but to search bit by bit. After a long time, he finally confirmed his model, the Soviet-made Polikarpov IL-15 fighter, a training plane that was rarely used in the country during World War II. He thought of a story. Could it be, please eliminate the 32 Type 97 heavy bombers in front? It's for real. It's really like this. My students have all died in battle. Now it's time for me, the teacher, to go up. This sentence emerged in Qin Guang's heart. That's right, the current him. After all his own fighter planes were shot down by the enemy in 5 battles, he piloted a training plane alone on the 24th of July 1940, and took off from Wujing to meet the enemy's 32 heavy bombers. A real historical aerial battle. 1v32. Huge difference in model. Every enemy plane had 6 self-defense machine guns on it. There was a total of at least 160 self-defense machine guns. The backward Polikarpov I-15 could only carry 2 light machine guns. This was not a small B fight. This was a real aerial battle. The Holy Grail used the black and white scenes in the documentary that Qin Guang had watched some time ago as a basis. It completely replicated this aerial battle that was enough to be recorded in the annals of human history using a black and white world. At that time, the highly skilled instructor with the surname Li took off with the determination to die. Although because of his outdated equipment he was unable to shoot down the enemy plane even after he had used up all his bullets, and in the end he had helplessly retreated, but he also created history. But now the Holy Grail's requirement for Qin Guang was that he must shoot down all the enemy planes under the exact same combat conditions. Chapter 725. Did he have to go so far? 1 against 32 in a real aerial battle? Lord Guang expressed that the pressure was a little too much. Instructor Li was able to weave in and out of 32 enemy planes, entering and exiting 3 times without shooting down a single enemy plane. That was enough to go down in history. He was facing 160 self-defense machine guns. In that era when aircraft performance was relatively backward, it was practically an inescapable net with no chance of survival. In addition, it was extremely difficult for Qin Guang to shoot down the enemy planes. As a large bomber at that time, be it its size, weapon load, or even the degree of armor, it far exceeded the I-15's firepower. The shabby I-15 only had machine guns and no cannons. In real history, Instructor Li sent parts of the enemy planes flying into the sky, but he still could not shoot down a single enemy plane. In the end, he even tried to directly crash into the enemy plane that was drifting outside the formation with 2 reporters on board. It was not difficult to imagine how determined he was at that time as he tried to perish together with the enemy. However, the enemy plane pilot was equally skilled and managed to turn in time to avoid his crash. When he first saw this documentary on the internet, Qin Guang had high respect for this pilot who had taken off to face the enemy plane with the determination to die. However, he did not expect that not long after he would personally play the role of Instructor Li in the World Cup and have to complete the impossible mission that he had failed to complete. Perhaps, the reason why the Heavenly Holy Grail had recreated this period of history in a black and white world was because he had seen the documentary before. This seemed to have been preordained. Forget it. Since he was already here, he might as well take things as they came. Theoretically speaking, since he could accomplish the feat of killing bees with the wings of a large passenger plane in the FC world of the Little Bee, he could also do it in a real aerial battle. Although the sense of control in the black and white world was almost exactly the same as the mosaic FC world of the Little Bee, the more realistic black and white scene, coupled with the heavy historical background of this matter, still gave him more pressure. However, he quickly adjusted his mood. Since there was this opportunity, he would try to complete the unfinished task of the martyrs in his world. He first closed his eyes tightly, then opened them abruptly. Qin Guang stretched out his hands and performed a series of rapid maneuvers that dazzled even his own eyes. The plane abruptly sped up and swooped forward. In the distance, densely packed black dots had already appeared on the horizon. It was the triangular formation formed by 31 planes and the other 97 heavy bomb that played the role of a reporter on the flank. Qin Guang's breathing gradually became heavy. He still remembered that when he first saw this precious historical material, the 4 guys in the dormitory almost burst into tears. They put themselves in his shoes. In the vast Wuxia, the air force had almost been wiped out in the crossfire with the enemy. 5 fierce air battles had broken out in the sky above the 5 capitals. Almost all of the pilots who had died were students he had been with day and night. After confirming that there was no longer a fighter plane that could take off, the enemy sent 32 heavy bombers at once with a swaggering mood, ready to stab the devastated city with another knife. At this time, the instructor surnamed Li climbed onto the backward training plane, took off alone with only 2 machine guns. What kind of mood did he have when he set off? What kind of decisiveness, what kind of courage to die? From the moment the engine was ignited at the airport, he had already regarded himself as a corpse. He didn't leave any last words. Even after he survived, he didn't make a sound and continued to silently dedicate himself in the 400 million 8 years. It wasn't until many years later that this dusty past was dug out from the historical materials of the invaders and made public. This unprecedented desperate battle in the history of aerial warfare finally appeared in front of the world. At this time, although the hero had passed away, his spirit would certainly be immortal. Even Qin Guang, a new-era college student who was deeply impacted by foreign culture, still cried when he saw this historical material. At this time, the roar of the I-15's engine became more ear-piercing, and the speed at which it moved forward was getting faster and faster. Qin Guang quickly pushed the performance of this relatively backward fighter plane to the extreme. He stared straight ahead, his eyes becoming more and more focused. At the same time, his heart was constantly pondering the way to win. Instructor Li's historical experience told him that he only had 2 light machine guns. It was impossible to directly destroy the enemy plane according to the conventional thinking of aerial combat. There was only one way to win, and that was to penetrate the cockpit of the enemy plane and directly kill the pilot. But this was not enough. There were a total of 7 people sitting on each 97 bomb, and perhaps there were backup pilots. Then each pilot of the enemy plane must be killed at least twice. This was almost an impossible task in a high-speed aerial battle. No matter how powerful a pilot was, it was impossible to accurately control the machine gun mounted on the nose of the plane while flying the plane. He also had to hit the enemy's cockpit while both sides were moving at high speed. But it did not matter. Today, Qin Guang was the strongest pilot in human history who had just been trained in the FC Little B world. He was the god of aerial combat. And he could resurrect and start over. Come on, little bastards. Enemy. Qin Guang pulled a full ship, changed direction and floated to the side. He was ready to cut into the enemy's formation from the side. He was like a stone thrown into the formation. In less than 10 seconds he flashed through the enemy's formation. He used the I-15's flexibility and maneuverability to the extreme, and passed through like a butterfly passing through flowers. The whole movement was done in one go and it was extremely smooth. In just a few seconds he performed at least 4 stunts that the I-15's performance could withstand. These stunts were not just to show off, but to make his position more erratic and unpredictable during close combat. At the same time he could constantly adjust his shooting angle. However, it was useless. After flying over, he only felt that his chest was empty. He looked down and saw a large pool of blood spreading out from inside. His back was also empty. It seemed that there was no support at all even if he tried to lie down. Qin Guang threw away his hands and slowly closed his eyes. How unlucky. His chest was shot through. 160 machine guns, blindly shooting at me. The firepower net was as ferocious as the nets used for fishing. There was no way to avoid it at all. After a long time, the roar of the engine reached his ears again. He was resurrected. Come on, little bastards. This time the engine was directly smashed and it crashed. Mother I'll kill you all. This time it was even worse. He was blown up before he could even get close. After dying 17 or 18 times in a row, he finally realized one thing. It was a miracle that Instructor Li was still alive. It was not that he was unlucky, but that Instructor Li must have used a god-level cheat and had a full point of luck. Not to mention entering and exiting 3 times, the probability of being hit the first time he rushed through the enemy's formation was as high as 99%. His luck was normal, but Instructor Li's was like a god's possession. This graduation exam was indeed extraordinary and should not be taken lightly. After collecting his thoughts, Qin Guang launched another attack. This time he slightly increased the speed by 3 km per hour. He had completely touched the limits of the I-15's performance. In addition, before he got close to the enemy's formation, he changed directions even more crazily and used the Dutch roll that could only be controlled on a higher-level aircraft. The plane was erratic in the air, moving like a pendulum and quickly approaching. Creaking sounds came from the fuselage as if it was going to fall apart in the next second. However, under Qin Guang's superb control, it firmly stepped on the critical point, not even half a step away from the lightning pool. Finally, he rushed through. Although he did not fire a single shot, he finally rushed through successfully for the first time. Unlike Instructor Li, this was not luck for him. It was the result of him constantly improving his own strength and constantly challenging and touching the limit. The two seemed to have the same result, but there was a fundamental difference. Instructor Li's success could not be replicated, but Qin Guang's success could be repeated again and again after he started. His first successful experience opened a whole new world for him. In actual combat with Zhenji, he finally came into contact with this feeling of always standing on the critical point. It was so mysterious, as if it was not a realm that humans could see at all. Many ace pilots before him might have touched this realm from time to time, but no one could go as far and as extreme as him. After dying 373 times, he finally managed to kill an enemy pilot on his first charge. After dying 1,787 times, he had finally killed every single pilot of the enemy aircraft once. After dying 3,935 times, Qin Guang waved his hands in a nearly hysterical manner. Success. All the pilots of the enemy planes died under his precise shot that pierced through the heart. Watching the 3297 BS explode one after another on the ground, turning into beautiful fireworks, Qin Guang clenched his fists tighter and tighter. I finally succeeded. This must be the most difficult flight graduation exam in history. Congratulations, Redeemer. You have passed the graduation exam. As soon as the heavenly Holy Grail finished speaking, the sun in the distance of the black and white world became even more dazzling, even dazzling people's eyes. I-15 was still rushing forward, but it was no longer under Qin Guang's control. Instead, it flew higher and higher straight into the sky. Suddenly, I-15 slowly disintegrated in the air, turning into stars that flew in all directions. Qin Guang's spiritual body was freed from it, but he still maintained the posture of rushing toward the sun. At the same time, the entire virtual black and white world quickly gathered, turning into the most primitive energy that gathered toward the sun in the sky. The ground below gradually distorted as if being sucked in by a whirlpool. The entire black and white world became smaller and smaller, but slowly regained its color. When Qin Guang came back to his senses, he once again appeared in the world of the FC. A fist-sized ball of light floated in front of him. Before he could figure out what was going on, the ball of light slammed into his head. After a long time, he shook his head. There seemed to be something extra in his head. It seemed to be a feeling, but it was the feeling that was engraved in his mind during the battle just now. It was the feeling of touching the limit. The space-time tunnel behind him appeared again. The suction force came, the light and shadow reversed, and he appeared in the world within the Cloud City Cup. He was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he lay on the ground like a zombie, sorting out the many aircraft parameters that were forced into his head when he first entered the graduation exam. It took him a few days, especially when he recalled the data of the Airbus A330, before he left the world within the cup. In a sense, his current brain was the most comprehensive book of flight piloting in the history of mankind. Unfortunately, just like how he knew how to open a refrigerator, he didn't necessarily know how to build one. He knew how to operate these airplanes, but he didn't know how to build them. Otherwise, he could at least earn a few billion just by selling the hand-drawn blueprints of the U.S. Empire's fighter jets to the old men. When he opened his eyes, the noisy man in the command center was still lecturing him endlessly. He really had to admire his voice. Qin Guang coughed twice. He thought to himself, "Brother, you can shut up now. I can be your ancestor now." Chief Qin compared to other large civil aircraft the A330. "Brother, that's enough. Stop it. You've said this for the third time today. I think I see land in front of me. We're almost at the shore, right? According to the map, I'm probably near the Bohai Peninsula. Quickly help me find an airport, thank you." He had confidence in his heart. Naturally, the way he spoke was different from before, full of vigor. "I have bad news. Please go ahead. I suggest you fly forward for another hour before considering landing. The area in front of you is currently experiencing a thunderstorm. I understand that, but I just had a new discovery. It seems that you can't synchronize the data on your side. The right engine is almost out of fuel." Qin Guang silently looked at the unlucky symbol on the dashboard. He didn't understand the symbol before, so he didn't think much of it. Now he finally understood. This plane must have stepped on the ancestral grave of some deity before taking off. This kind of bad luck is out of this world. After all this time, we've been leaking fuel for more than half an hour. There must have been a problem with the oil pipeline when we encountered the clear sky turbulence. After flying for so long, it slowly started leaking. Damn, this plane is really crazy. Qin Guang's mind began to recall the accident list of this unlucky A330 model over the years. Suddenly, his face was full of tears. This is a bit of a disaster. Forget it. Compared to others, at least my engine hasn't exploded. The remaining fuel can still fly for about half an hour. There's still hope. Bang. Boom. There are some things that you really can't think about, especially when your melon seeds have been blessed. A violent tremor came from the right side of the plane. The plane shook violently. Qin Guang used all his strength to hold onto the chair so that he didn't fall. The chief flight attendant beside him lost his grip and flew up. His head hit the corner of the control panel and he fainted. In the passenger cabin, the person sitting near the wing had completely collapsed. The engine was smoking. "Brother, quickly give me the coordinates. The right engine exploded and is on fire. I'm going to have to land." Qin Guang took a deep breath. He was jumping up and down in the cockpit with extreme speed. One person was like 3 people. He activated the auxiliary power and the emergency pressurization device to maintain the plane's balance. At the same time, he calmly spoke into the microphone. The newly minted ace flying emperor, the new and hot human god of aerial combat, was about to face the extremely bad situation of a single-engine forced landing in a thunderstorm. This wretched god was really giving him face. Chapter 726. The person in charge of the command center on the other side was also dumbfounded. "Director Qin, did you go out today without looking at the almanac? Why did everything happen?" In fact, there is a legend in the civil aviation industry that trouble often does not walk alone. Behind one trouble there is often one trouble after another. An airplane is a big guy composed of thousands of parts. When these parts are in normal operation, civil aviation is the safest means of transportation in the world. But when flying in the sky, once a link goes wrong, it will often cause a series of chain reactions, evolving a small accident into a devastating disaster. Therefore, the security check of every airplane before takeoff is particularly important. Even if it is only a small screw problem, it will often cause irreparable consequences. A seemingly inconspicuous and subtle operation of the pilot can also put everyone in a situation of eternal damnation. Unlike driving and sailing, when an airplane flies at high altitudes, once something goes wrong, it is impossible to stop in the air for maintenance. Aviation is no small matter, the details show the real thing, this is the truth. Today Qin Guang's plane was first hijacked. The gunfight in the cockpit and the destruction of the robbers caused many electronic equipment in the cockpit to be damaged. Then they encountered a rare clear sky turbulence at high altitudes. An engine was affected. If the crew was still alive, they might be able to repair it in time, but the crew had already been wiped out by the robbers. Qin Guang could only let it go. Before, he did not know how to repair it. Now that he has become the god of aerial combat, he also has a lot of knowledge in civil aviation. He can give it a try, but there is no time. He is the only one on the entire plane who can be relied on, and there is no one to help him. What's more, at this time when he is about to land, he encountered thunderstorms. Can only be said that the heavens are beautiful. As for the oil pipe leak and engine fire, it is said to be accidental, but in fact, it is the inevitable result of the previous clear sky turbulence and the lack of crew. Director Chen. Calm down. You must calm down. The person in charge of the Aviation Command Center shouted while desperately waving his hand to the staff around him to quickly come up with an emergency plan. On the one hand, they had to accurately locate DL 199333, and on the other hand, they had to immediately come up with a route plan. Qin Guang had already finished the workload for 3 people. It was useless to be anxious now, so he sat down again. Bro, I'm not in a hurry. I'm really not in a hurry. Sounds like you're even more anxious than I am. Little Qin. Be strong. The old men were eavesdropping again. Qin Guang. Come back alive. As long as you can come back alive, I'm yours. All right, Jiang Yage was eavesdropping as well. Chief. Hurry up and give it a shot. Well, Xianxia was also online. I say, everyone, can you not be so surprised? How big of a deal was that? Wasn't it just a forced landing? It's a piece of cake. Don't I still have an engine that can move? Back in the year 2001, wasn't there an A330 that glided for more than 100 kilometers without any power and landed safely with both of its engines blasted? What Qin Guang said was true. In the end, under the pilot's superb and calm operation, the plane made the longest glide flight in history and finally landed in the Azores Air Force Base. Only some of the passengers were injured, but no one was killed. It was hailed as one of the miracles in aviation history. Everyone was about to cry at his casual tone. They knew what he was talking about, but he was a top-notch pilot who had been flying for thousands of hours, while he was a newbie who hadn't even made any progress yet. How can we be compared with them? Besides, they have an entire crew to come up with ideas and rescue the plane. You're just a dabbler. How can we count on you? All right, quickly draw out the route. I can only delay for 5 minutes at most before I have to descend into the troposphere. Can we talk less nonsense and do more practical things? Okay, right away. Chief Qin, I won't let you down. Qin Guang's calmness seemed to infect the people in the command center through the microphone. The person in charge over there clenched his teeth. He thought that even a true rookie like Chief Qin was so calm. His current performance was a bit unworthy of his identity. The elders in Beijing's conference room also fell into silence. They couldn't control their emotions as they imagined how desperate Qin Guang must be. If they were in Qin Guang's shoes, they wouldn't be as calm and confident as Qin Guang if they were in Qin Guang's shoes. This young man is really formidable. Unfortunately, it seems that he really can't escape this time, right? Only one engine in a thunderstorm, and the remaining fuel can only last for half an hour. Is there a worse situation than this? Even the aviation miracle of gliding 120 kilometers in 2001 couldn't compare to his current situation. Mr. Qin, the passengers are a bit out of control now. What should we do? At this moment, the flight attendants outside shouted from the communicator under the purser who had fallen to the ground, accompanied by some violent and furious screams. After seeing the engine hanging under the wing emit smoke, and the smoke was getting bigger and bigger, the passengers in the cabin finally couldn't sit still anymore. The situation outside was a bit out of control. If it wasn't for Sun Xiaoxuan being outside, Qin Guang wouldn't have bothered with these people at all. When he opened the cabin door, he saw many excited people crowding around the first-class cabin, desperately trying to squeeze their way forward. Several Pan Am flight attendants were trying their best to maintain order, but it was to no avail. Let us in. Such a big thing happened. We have the right to know. That's right. You found a pilot and a programmer, and now you tell us that everything is under control. We don't believe it. There must be something fishy going on. Who's in charge now? Who's flying the plane now? What situation are we in? You must give us an explanation. The crowd outside was indeed a bit out of control. Even Sun Xiaoxuan was pulled out. The passengers in the first-class cabin knew that Qin Guang was the current person in charge of the plane, but because Qin Guang and the flight attendants had been very calm, at least in front of them, these people had been able to sit still. However, when the people in the economy class told them that the engine was smoking, they couldn't sit still anymore. Are you Mr. Chen's female companion? Let Mr. Chen explain to us what's going on now. Sun Xiaoxuan was still sitting in her seat, but she was surrounded by many people. Even the guys who had been chatting with Chen Guang before were now angry. All of you shut up. What are you doing? Don't you know how busy I am now? He was so busy, but these guys were still causing trouble behind his back. Chen Guang was furious. I'm in a hurry to save a life. Who has time to be your commentator? I won't stop you if you want to die, but I don't want to die yet. I can only tell you that whether the people on this plane can live or not depends on whether I can safely make a forced landing. If you want to live, you'd better sit in your seats obediently. Everyone was shocked by Chen Guang's firm and confident attitude. Use your brains and think. What can you do except believe me now? You can't do anything. So I'll be grateful if you don't make trouble. But we're afraid. A young passenger still said with some excitement. Unexpectedly, Chen Guang rushed out, stood in front of him and punched the young man in the head. The guy didn't even have time to scream before he fell to the ground and fainted. Come on, who else is afraid? I'm very good at comforting people. I guarantee that you'll see immediate results. One punch for one person and you'll know your place in minutes. Even if the plane really crashes, I'll let you die painlessly. This trick worked. Everyone immediately became a lot more obedient. The flight attendants also took the opportunity to help persuade them. At this time, everyone should not be petty. Besides believing in him, what else could they do? But Mr. Chen, you don't know how to fly a plane. Having said that, there were still people who understood at this time. Since the flight attendants asked if there was a pilot, it meant that this guy surnamed Chen was unreliable. That's right. We can't rest assured if we put our lives in your hands. The crowd began to make noise again. Chen Guang was very calm. Well, why don't you jump now? If you don't believe me, why don't you jump? Well, no one said anything again. Jump my ass. This is a plane, not a car. You can jump whenever you want. I don't know the rules on the plane very well, but your current behavior has seriously interfered with my control of the plane. Every time you talk nonsense with me, you bring everyone one step closer to heaven. If anyone thinks he has the ability, then stand up and give me a hand. Do you? After waiting for a few seconds, the crowd remained silent. Well, no. If you don't, then shut up. Sun Xiaoxuan, come here and sit with me in the cockpit. As Chen Guang spoke, he took out the gun that he had picked up from the ground and continued. Now I'll kill anyone who dares to cause trouble and drag everyone down with him. I'm a man of my word, and you can try if you don't believe me. After that, Chen Guang really took Sun Xiaoxuan in, and then closed the cockpit door, ignoring these idiots outside. His quite fierce reaction really subdued the crowd. Until the cockpit door was closed, no one outside dared to say a word. The flight attendant in charge of maintaining order took a deep breath and then said, "Please return to your seats. The plane may have some violent turbulence, and if you leave your seat you may really be injured. If the plane really crashes, the seat belt can also increase the chance of survival for everyone. Although the situation is indeed very bad, please believe in Mr. Chen. He is our only hope." In fact, everyone knew that the flight attendant was right. They had no choice but to trust Chen Guang. On the other side, Chen Guang returned to the cockpit. Calling command, calling command. The right-wing engine can no longer be repaired. It has completely lost power, and there is a possibility of a second explosion at any time. The remaining fuel can only support 28 minutes and 36 seconds. I will start to lower the altitude. Calling DL 199333. The nearest airport to you is Jiaodao Air Force Base, 73 kilometers away. There is a runway there that is enough for the A330 to land. You are about to enter a thunderstorm zone. Please take frost protection measures. At this time, the conference room in Yanjing was so silent that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. The room where Xin Qin and Wu Miaowan were in was also solemn. In a hotel far away in the United Kingdom, Jiang Yage and Jin Shiyue were also sitting quietly. Everyone had thousands of words in their hearts, but they could not open their mouths. No one was really optimistic about Chen Guang, but at this moment what choice did they have but to rely on him? Even if they were desperate, even if they always regretted that they had thousands of words to say to him, but they could not finish them, everyone resisted the urge to speak at this time. They did not dare to make a sound to disturb him. On the other side, Chen Guang's communication with the command center continued. The frost protection measures have already been taken. Next. So fast. The people in the command center were stunned at first. After all, in his mind, Qin Guang was just a half-baked person who sharpened his spear at the last minute. Ordinary people could not think of this frost protection measures. As the two of them were talking, the altitude of the plane had gradually decreased. Hundreds of people in the command center were solemnly waiting. Although they could not remotely control the plane, after a long period of technical research, the command center had a better grasp of the operating parameters of the plane. The more they knew, the more they could help the pilot on the plane to make decisions, and the faster the command center could come up with suggestions and tell Qin Guang on the plane what to do. It sounded simple, but the probability of success was extremely low. For a person who had never been in contact with piloting a flight, even if he had grasped some of the operating methods of the instruments and equipment through intensive study, how could he react in such an urgent situation? Moreover, he was just a dabbler. In an air crash, every step of the operation was a race against time. A delay of a few seconds would cause the plane to fall into an irrecoverable situation. First of all, the current situation of the plane was not known by the command center through normal information channels. There was a serious lag in the information and it could not be adjusted in real time. Secondly, after Qin Guang received instructions, it was very likely that he would not be able to find the instrument. The person in charge of the command center was very worried that it would take him a few minutes to fine-tune the parameters. Every step was delayed by a few minutes. This was a catastrophic impact in a race against time landing, not to mention the situation was so bad that it was almost impossible to land successfully. Now, in the heart of the person in charge, the hundreds of experts in the command center and the things they were doing might not even be counted as doing their best and leaving it to fate. In general, it could only be regarded as a struggle that was better than nothing. Until the last moment, never give up. In the history of human aviation, about 1/3 of the air crashes were caused by extreme weather, and the remaining 2/3 were caused by things such as hijacking, equipment failure, errors in the command center, or pilot error. But there had never been a flight as unlucky as today. First, there was a hijacking, then there was a clear sky turbulence, and then one of the engines was completely destroyed. In addition, the contact between the plane and the ground command center was also left with the most basic intercom function for a long time. All other synchronized information was lost for a time, and after it was restored, it was seriously delayed. In the entire history of civil aviation, this was unprecedented. Not to mention that there would be no one in the future, but before this, there were really not many people who could be so unlucky. No, not to mention the history of civil aviation, this was unprecedented in the entire history of aviation. Chapter 727. The person in charge of the command center clenched his fists. In his heart, he imagined Director Chen's desperation and determination at this moment, and he silently shed 2 lines of tears. No matter what the result was, to dare to sit in the cockpit at this time and take over the responsibility of the deceased captain, Director Chen, you're a good man. Then he quickly discovered that something was wrong. The person in front of him didn't seem to know anything. The left wing has been impacted. Pushed down by 5 degrees. It's done. The left wing engine is frosted. So, start the turbocharger. It's been started for a minute. The left wing engine has been successfully reignited. Power distribution. It's done. We've left the clouds. Lift the wings. The current wind direction is. Okay. You're now 71 kilometers away from Jiaodao Airport. Direction 270. Adjustments have been completed. We're now in a single-engine propulsion state. Can you directly tell me which direction to turn? Also, I can't maintain an altitude of 39,000 feet. I have to push down to 33,000 feet. At this time, the person in charge's face was simply filled with confusion. Strange. Where did the problem go? Why the hell is it that every time we make a decision you complete it on your side? Have you really never flown a plane before? Also, can you really handle it alone? How did Qin Guang manage to handle it? The bitterness of it was simply not worth telling others. Only Sun Xiaoxuan and the purser, who were also in the cockpit fastening themselves to their seat belts, could only watch anxiously. This guy's legs seemed to have springs installed on them. One moment he appeared in the captain's seat, his hands fiercely pressing the instruments at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, he suddenly ran to the right auxiliary seat, pulled down a wrench and fiercely jabbed at the pile of buttons. In the next moment he jumped back again. He operated the instruments on both sides by himself. He was simply too busy. When his hands waved quickly, Sun Xiaoxuan could even see a mirage. At this life and death moment, seeing Qin Guang busying himself with the lives of an entire plane, yet he couldn't help at all, Sun Xiaoxuan felt both disappointed and amazed. Looking at him, it didn't seem like he was blindly pressing. Could it be that this was the legendary secret technique, repeated horizontal jumps? How strange. At such a tense moment I actually want to laugh. Sun Xiaoxuan thought that he might be crazy. When he was sitting in the first-class cabin outside, he didn't know how critical the situation was, but after he came in he saw that Qin Guang was doing the work of several people. From time to time he would jump up and down between the two drivers' seats, and from time to time he would grab the operating computer and press madly on it, crazily entering data and calculating values. How could Sun Xiaoxuan not understand how dangerous the situation was when he saw how tired and sweaty he was, yet he didn't know tiredness or rest. But what was inconceivable was that he was not afraid at all. He had never given up and he had never thrown caution to the wind like this. He would definitely be fine. I trust him. Command Center. This is number 333. I have successfully passed through the clouds. There is ice on the right wing engine. I have activated the auxiliary de-icing equipment and am now turning. Qin Guang said as he pulled down the manual switch. If the plane could be piloted automatically, it would be able to deal with the problem when the detector detected the ice forming. But now he could only rely on manual control. Very good. The runway of Jiaodao Airport has been prepared. It is 3,000 meters long. Please maintain a stable flight. This runway is a little short. Yes, but it should be enough. Wait, your number 1 and number 2 slits have malfunctioned. Your information is lagging by a minute. I have already eliminated the malfunction. This was all done by Qin Guang a minute ago. The Airbus A330 was the technological crystallization of modern society. It had condensed countless lessons and wisdom accumulated over 100 years of human aviation history. It had the corresponding ability to deal with many unexpected situations. At this time, the person in charge of the command center suddenly realized one thing. The situation was really a bit abnormal. The person in charge of controlling the plane was not like a newbie at all. On the contrary, he was an extremely experienced veteran pilot. He didn't seem to need the technical guidance from his side at all. Every time he made a decision, he walked ahead of the hundreds of experts on his side. Even if the information was lagging, the speed at which he made decisions was a bit too fast. Calling Flight 333. Your right wing has lost power. The steering performance is insufficient. The tail needs to be rotated by 7 degrees. It has already been rotated. Thank you. Are you really a virgin? The man in charge of the aviation center wanted to give himself a slap. His balls hurt like hell. Every time I help you make a decision, you always tell me that it has already been settled. You tell me, what should I do? Should I say it or not? If the other side was an experienced captain in such a tense moment, the ground command center would indeed not waste any more words. They should let the captain controlling the plane concentrate on making decisions. The plane was flying in the air. The person who understood the situation the most and could directly control the plane was always the captain. The ground command center should and could only do that. That was to choose to believe in the captain and provide information support. After all, no one wanted to survive more than the people on the plane. But Qin Guang was not a real captain at all. Before this, he didn't even have the experience of flying a plane. This made the situation of the person in charge of the command center especially difficult. Tell me, what should I do now? Should I believe you? Can I believe you? Will everything I say help you or not? Do you need a person to think calmly and make decisions, or do you need me, the person in the ground command center, to help you from a distance? He didn't know whether it was better for him to shut up or to continue to give suggestions. At this time, they were only 64 kilometers away from Jiaodong Airport. There were less than 15 minutes before they landed. Every second was too precious. Hearing this, the old man Xen Qin Wu Miaowan and Jin Shiyue, who was far away in Europe, also realized this problem. In these few minutes, Qin Guang's performance was a bit too monstrous. He didn't look like he was flying a plane for the first time. Brother, I know what you are thinking now. Yes, that's right. You only need to provide me with information support. As for decision-making, leave it all to me. You can shut up now. Qin Guang's voice came from the communication device again. Yes, at this time, it was meaningless to accept the delayed orders from the command center. Okay. The person in charge of the command center sighed helplessly. There was indeed no other choice. Right at this moment, Qin Guang suddenly made a decision. He had just sensed a slight tremor, but there was something unusual about it. Xiaoxian, go to the passenger cabin and take a look. Stand by the window and look at the engine hanging on the wing. Pay special attention to whether there is a white misty line behind the engine. Sun Xiaoxian quickly untied the safety belt and took him out. In fact, this matter should have been done by the purser, but at this time the purser was still in a daze. Qin Guang didn't have time to contact other flight attendants. Sun Xiaoxian returned to the passenger cabin. The passengers here had already been comforted by the flight attendants and sat upright in their respective seats. They were tightly fastened with seat belts. From time to time, there was the sound of crying in the cabin. The atmosphere of tension, pessimism, and despair continued to spread in the cabin. Sun Xiaoxian could even smell the emotion called despair in the air. Taking a deep breath, Sun Xiaoxian squeezed out a faint smile on his face and then quickly walked forward with the help of the aisle. Going straight to the window next to the wing, Sun Xiaoxian looked up. The passenger next to the wing hurriedly asked, "Are you a staff member? How on earth is the plane now?" Sun Xiaoxian retracted his gaze and gave a slight smile. "Everything is as usual. The one piloting the plane right now is the most outstanding person in the world. He knows how to fly a plane and is very professional. Everything is under control. Please fasten your seatbelt. We will land safely." After saying that, she quickly walked to the cockpit. Unlike last time, although the atmosphere was extremely solemn, the efforts of the flight attendants made everyone calm down. Everyone knew that even if they committed suicide now, they should never disturb the staff. Sun Xiaoxian walked very fast, almost trotting all the way back to the cockpit. Closing the door, she said very quickly, "The right engine is still smoking." Qin Guang replied, "Very good. I have turned on the automatic fire extinguisher in advance. There is only smoke. The fire has been controlled. Is there any obvious damage to the wing?" "No, but there seems to be a long white line behind the engine. It is very thin. It is leaking oil, but I have cut off the fuel supply to the right engine in advance. Alright, go back to your cabin. Everyone should be quiet by now." Qin Guang was still very calm. "No, I want to stay here with you." Qin Guang coughed lightly and then roared fiercely, "I will only say this once. Go back. Don't waste my time." Sun Xiaoxian's face froze. Of course, she knew what Qin Guang meant by this sentence. In an emergency landing, the most dangerous position was, of course, the cockpit. If the plane hit the ground head first, the people sitting in the passenger cabin had a chance to survive, but the people in the cockpit had absolutely no chance to survive. He let her go at this time because he was trying his best to ensure his survival. He was ready to die. In fact, Sun Xiaoxian guessed right. Although Qin Guang was already the best pilot in history when the plane was flying in the air, you never knew what would happen in the next moment. Who could say that the pilots who died in the air crash were not excellent? Struggling to survive in the face of disaster and snatching life from the hands of death, in addition to ability, luck was also indispensable. Unfortunately, so far everyone on the plane was extremely unlucky. Obviously, the goddess of luck was on the other side of the earth today. Chapter 728. At this time, the purser had also completely recovered her senses. She patted Sun Xiaoxian on the shoulder. "Little girl, I know you're worried about your lover, but it's precisely at times like this that you should listen to him. But you guys," the purser said with a solemn expression, "I'm a staff member of this plane. I have the responsibility and obligation to be on standby here at all times. As for Mr. Qin, he's a great man." On the other side, Qin Guang no longer paid attention to the situation behind him. Instead, he once again focused all his attention on piloting the plane. One person playing the role of two pilots and a technician was simply too tiring. Sun Xiaoxian tightly pursed her lips and looked deeply at Qin Guang's back. Finally, she opened the cabin door and returned to the first-class cabin. She pulled out her seat belt and fastened it. The people around her all gathered their heads, wanting to ask her about the situation. However, Sun Xiaoxuan put away the fear in her heart. A calm smile once again appeared on her face. It's all right. He's very confident now. Everyone just needs to believe in him with me. At this time, Qin Guang's voice came from the loudspeaker. Hello passengers. I am your captain Qin Guang. The plane will land at Jiaodao Airport in 12 minutes and 30 seconds. I will bring you back alive. Thank you everyone. When the ground control tower heard Qin Guang's words, it was also silent. Regardless of whether he could succeed in the end, or whether he knew how to fly a plane as a passenger, he bravely sat in the most dangerous position of the captain at this special time. He fought for the lives of the 300 people on the plane. He was indeed great enough. In fact, before today the image of Qin Guang in the hearts of the old masters wasn't very high. Perhaps he was just a lucky person with good luck and a bit of talent. He had obtained the favor of the god of fate, which was why he was able to become the friend of someone like Sect Master Wen. He was also extremely close to Old Master Lin's grandson Lin Jingwei, and had also learned some extraordinary skills, which allowed him to do very well in the online world. But why did Sect Master Wen admire him? Why did Jin Shuiwei become infatuated with him? Why did Jiang Yage also seem to like him? Why did martial artists like Xen Qin and Wu Miaoan willingly become his deputy bureau chief? Why did he always make the people around him involuntarily take him as their master? Even an illustrious third generation like Lin Jingwei, who coincidentally lived in the same dormitory as him, was willing to be his little brother. Even a proud son of heaven like Bai Hua quickly became his friend. At this moment, these old masters who boasted that they had seen too many life and death situations, finally understood that the most precious thing about this kid was this. If it was anyone else in his current situation, they would not be able to do better than him. They would not be able to be braver and more responsible than him. He had a kind of spirit. No matter how big the matter was, he would not be afraid and he would be able to handle it. It was really hard to imagine that he had never flown a plane before today, but at this moment he was able to perform so professionally and so calmly. This was no longer as simple as the younger generation being to surpass the older. He was simply a genius. A great genius. He was a genius who could carry a mountain on his shoulders and A330 and 300 lives on his shoulders. At this moment, in a place that Qin Guang couldn't see, 4 girls were tightly covering their mouths. They were afraid that the sound of their sobs would be transmitted over there and disturb Qin Guang. The hundreds of staff in the China Airlines command center could understand Qin Guang's current situation. But they were all wrong. They thought that the current Qin Guang had performed perfectly and was sufficiently experienced, but they did not expect that the true ace pilot's skills were just beginning. If he succeeded, this would be a forced landing that would go down in the annals of history. Calling the command center, I don't have time to do flight control checks. I will shut down the left engine and enter a full glide state. Qin Guang spoke into the communicator as he rapidly controlled the plane. Only one engine can be started. I don't have a second chance. Please report the airport wind speed and direction. Wind direction 180 degrees, wind speed 10 knots. Very good, it just happens to be a south wind against the wind. The plane continued to descend, much faster than a normal descent. After all, there was only a distance of 60 kilometers left for him. This distance might be very far for a vehicle, but for a plane it was only a matter of 10 minutes. Does number 333 require assistance in calculating the landing speed? No need, I am currently checking the remaining fuel. The left engine has 684 tons of fuel remaining. I will land at 154 knots. That's too fast. The distance is too short. I must reduce the altitude as soon as possible, but I also have to speed up a little before landing. Otherwise I will fall straight down. The person in charge of the command center no longer questioned Qin Guang's decision. In fact, he had already made a major mistake. No matter whether the captain's decision was right or wrong, in a situation where the information was not synchronized as the ground commander, he had to unconditionally trust the captain's decision. But in his heart he could not help but scream crazily, "How did you calculate 154 knots? The plane was getting closer and closer to Jiaodong Airport. There were not many opportunities left for Qin Guang. He controlled the altitude at a very dangerous level and maintained the glide to land. The plane made a large circle in the air to aim at the runway. Because the electronic control system was completely out of contact with the ground, Qin Guang could only continuously adjust the angle according to the verbal instructions of the ground command center's radar. The thunderstorm had stopped a lot at this time, but the gloomy sky and drizzling rain still made visibility very poor. Even more unfavorable was that because the right engine had exploded, the plane had lost 65% of its steering performance. This caused his circle to be much larger than normal. The glide height exceeded the warning line, and he had to increase his speed slightly to maintain his altitude. If the autopilot system could still be used, in the process of increasing speed with a single engine, the plane could use the precise values calculated by the computer to adjust the amplitude of the tail fins. But now this had to be done by Qin Guang himself. The chief flight attendant sat rigidly in the back, watching Qin Guang's amazing operation. She had been a flight attendant for more than 10 years. But she had never thought that a person could actually control the plane so steadily in fully manual mode. Was this guy's brain filled with a computer? How did he calculate the angle? Similar questions popped up in the chief flight attendant's mind again. What was even more frightening was that in such a busy manual operation, it was as if one person was doing the work of several people at the same time. One moment he would turn on this switch, the next moment he would press that button. In the process, he would occasionally pay attention to the constantly refreshed alerts on the central monitoring system. And from time to time, his hand would reach out like lightning to deal with the central monitoring system's alert information. Are you even human? F*C, this is so tiring. On the other side, Qin Guang finally had the plane completely aimed at the runway. He shook his hands. In fact, his hands and feet were not tired. It was just that he was mentally exhausted from holding on for so long as he was the pilot of 3 people. Please verify that the plane is completely aimed at the runway. Also, number 333, your current speed is too fast. Alright, brother. Everything is under control. When I open the landing gear, the wind resistance will increase. At a wind speed of 10 knots against the wind, this speed is just right. Seeing that success was imminent, Qin Guang was relieved. Brother, are you kidding me? How can the god of aerial combat not aim at the runway? You don't know how good my eyes are. When I throw a dart, I can clearly see the legs of a fly dozens of meters away. Right now, with just my eyes, they are even more accurate than a radar, okay? I will treat this plane and myself as a big dart and throw it directly. As for the speed, don't worry, young man. Looks a little fast, but this is the precise calculation of the old man. Alright, it's completely the intuition of an ace pilot. I can stop. The runway is 3,000 meters long. I can stop at 2,950 meters. I can guarantee that the error is no more than 5 meters. Brag, my pride and indulgence. For some reason his mind was not thinking. As he calmly adjusted the nose of the plane, at the same time he pulled open the manual landing gear switch. He was actually humming a song. Brother, why are you singing? The purser and the person on the other end of the communication device stared with their eyes wide open. You are really calm. At this time, the person in charge of the command center finally could not hold it in anymore. Chief Qin, your right speed pedal can't be opened. You only have a single engine and the reverse thrust can't be used. This I know. I knew it a long time ago. I really don't want to explain to you the maximum pressure that the A330's tires can withstand. I can only tell you that this is the only way for me to land. If not, if I slow down even a little, I will fall headfirst. Also, I can accurately tell you that out of 10 of my brakes, 6 will explode, but not a single person will die. I will stop at 2,950 meters. I will not go off the runway. At this moment, Qin Guang was unhappy with the commotion coming from the other party. What are you crying for? I've already noticed all of this, alright? If I waited for you to remind me, I would have died 7 or 8 times. What? You can even calculate how many tires will explode when you stop. Don't be so pretentious. Also, what's with the 2,950 meters you mentioned? I have never heard of a pilot who can calculate so accurately during a forced landing. This is still an emergency landing. And it is a military runway that is much shorter than a normal runway. It is only 3,000 meters. I don't know why, but I feel that you are bragging. At a time like this, can we be a little more normal? Even though he was cursing in his heart, the pitiful person in charge of the command center had no choice but to swallow the thousands of words he wanted to say. Again he could not say anything, especially not to disturb the captain. I want to fly very high. You are singing again. The commander of the command center gritted his teeth. He once again doubted his professionalism. He really wanted to interrupt this guy. The plane finally approached the runway. The ground control tower looked nervously at DL199333 on the screen. The hundreds of people in the China Airlines command center clenched their fists. Their palms were sweating from nervousness. In the next few seconds, this disaster-ridden Airbus A330 would meet its final fate. The others who were further away weren't any better off. The cabin was even more solemn. Everyone was so nervous that they could not breathe. Sun Xiaoxuan's hands were clenched tightly. She did not pray to any god. She just kept thinking in her heart. Qin Guang said that everyone would be safe and sound. He would not lie. What he said, he would definitely keep his word. When the wheels of the landing gear touched the ground, there was a burst of ear-piercing noise. The plane was shaking violently. Life and death were separated by a thin line. The moment before the landing was the most dangerous moment of the entire process. There was also the biggest difficulty here. When a normal plane was about to land, it usually needed to maintain autopilot for a period of time. The computer would distribute power and control the engine. At the same time, it would turn on various deceleration devices to adjust the speed. But Qin Guang did not have any of these. The plane had stalled to the point where it was constantly descending. Only a single engine could not provide stable power. There was no autopilot system to adjust the opening degree of the flaps for him. All of this had to be manually controlled by him. An experienced pilot could rely on his feelings to find out the opening degree of the flaps and leave the fate to his own intuition. But in the eyes of others, Qin Guang was a complete novice. It was impossible for him to have any experience. In other words, even an experienced pilot could not rely solely on human strength to be more accurate than the computer's calculation. But the fact was that during the entire gliding and landing process, Qin Guang had really relied on the fine adjustments of his fingers to control the opening degree of the flaps to the peak. When he said that the plane would land at 154 knots, it was exactly the same, not an inch more. Apart from that, the landing angle was also a big difficulty. But Qin Guang had controlled the height of the nose of the plane perfectly. All the wheels touched the ground almost at the same time. The moment the 10 wheels touched the ground, Qin Guang slammed on the brakes. He raised the nose of the plane to prevent it from falling upside down. At the same time he began braking. Creaking sounds rang through every part of the plane. All the parts started to shake wildly. Everyone in the cabin screamed. The people on the other side of the communication device could even hear the terrifying creaking sounds. The commanders in the control tower of Jiaodong Airport, the firefighters and ambulances waiting nearby watched as the plane's tires sprouted thick smoke due to the intense friction. The drizzle could not stop the tires from quickly heating up due to the intense friction. Just as the person in charge of the command center had said, landing at 154 knots was too fast. The plane quickly charged past half of the runway. With a loud bang, the first 2 tires at the front of the plane exploded due to being unable to withstand the terrifying impact and friction. The steel frame below the nose of the plane smashed heavily against the ground and then broke. The nose of the plane completely touched the runway, bringing with it a path of sparks as it quickly advanced. Terrifying heat rose from the bottom of the plane. The engine fairing hanging under the wings scraped against the ground. The sparks were as bright as the sun on the ground. The parts flew along the way. I am a little bird. I want to fly but I can't fly high. What time was this? You're still singing. Just as everyone was so nervous their hearts were about to burst out of their throats, Qin Guang's broken gong-like voice, the off-key singing that went to the Pacific Ocean, came out of the communication device again. It almost made people think they were hallucinating. It wasn't until he began to sing the next line, "I'm looking for a warm embrace, is this request too high?" that everyone believed that he was really singing. You're crazy. You're not only the first pilot in history to perform an emergency landing without any flying experience, you're the only pilot in history to sing off-key while landing. What a lunatic. Chapter 729. Actually, this really couldn't be blamed on Qin Guang. First of all, was he afraid at this time? Of course he was still a bit afraid. Even an ace pilot couldn't withstand the explosion of an air crash. But based on his many years of piloting experience, he determined that although this kind of landing looked very frightening, the success rate wasn't low. Therefore, at this time he was in a very complicated state of mind. He looked like he was afraid, but no matter what was said at this time, all of his energy was focused on the plane that was rubbing against the ground. This kind of highly concentrated state was like a person walking while thinking about things, thinking about them and involuntarily humming a song. Therefore, the sparks and lightning on the runway continued and Qin Guang's song didn't stop. For the current him, he probably only needed to do one thing, and that was to step on the brakes with all his might. As for everything else, everything was under control. Don't panic, because panicking was useless. Before landing, he had already used his ability as an ace pilot to do the job of 3 people. He had done all the necessary things and left the rest to fate. When the plane finally ran 3/4 of the way across the runway, it was just as he said. The middle section of the 4 tires had also burst, and most of the fuselage was pressed against the ground. The sparks it brought were even more dazzling and the scene looked simply ghastly. Fortunately, there were still the last 2 sets of 4 wheels to support it, not allowing the wing with the fuel tank to stick to the ground. Fire trucks and ambulances had long since rushed out from their respective standby positions, madly rushing to the end of the airport runway. Everyone's fists were tightly clenched and the commander of the command center's eyes were glued to the screen. With every meter the A330 advanced, his heart rose an inch higher into his throat. Stop. Stop it for me. Don't rush anymore. We're going to rush out of the runway. Jiaodao Airport was a military base, and there simply wasn't as much room for the runway as there was for civilian bases. At the end of the runway was a dense forest with uneven ground. If they couldn't control it and rushed out, the wing that was already on the verge of collapse would inevitably break. In particular, there was still a lot of fuel left in the fuel tank of the left wing. Once the wing was seriously damaged, a large amount of fuel would leak out. Considering the ultra-high temperature produced by the friction between the fuselage and the ground, as long as this fuel came into contact with it, it would definitely ignite. Once it ignited, it would explode. I didn't believe in God before, but now I have to pray to the God of aviation. God, make number 333 stop, hurry up and stop. Oh God, please bless 333's wings, bless 333's fuel tank, bless everyone on this plane. An air crash could only be considered safe if everyone was evacuated, because no one knew what would happen in the next moment. A disaster would always happen in an instant. The plane was priceless, but the lives of the passengers on board were even more important. Every time there was an air crash, it brought irreparable pain to the world. Aviation was no small matter, so every time there was an abnormal situation on the plane, as long as it could provide help to save the disaster, everyone would be mobilized in an instant. As long as it could increase the chance of survival for the people on the plane, everyone did not mind putting in the greatest effort. But today the gigantic A330 and the more than 300 lives on it were all placed in the hands of a person who had no flying experience at all. Moreover, the person had persisted until the final stage of the forced landing. This was the first time in aviation history that such a thing had happened. There are only 2 steps left, hurry up and stop. Oh my God. Bless us. The person in charge of the command center prayed in his heart once again. His prayer would definitely come true because in human history, the only living god of aerial combat, the god of aviation, the god he prayed to, was on the plane. This god was singing, stepping on the brakes and looking at the forest that was getting closer and closer. Qinguang, why don't I teleport you, but the price is very heavy. I might sleep for 100 years, really 100 years, but you definitely won't die. There's no way to stop. At this time, even Liuli was starting to feel uncertain. However, Qinguang shook his head fiercely. This time he didn't talk to Liuli in his heart but shouted out loud, "Are you kidding me? There are still 2 tires that haven't burst. How can I leave? If I leave, who will step on the brakes? I said 2,950 meters, so it must be 2,950 meters. Absolutely. Never. Charge out." The chief flight attendant behind him didn't know who he was talking to, nor could she understand his roar in Mandarin. However, she could hear the determination in Qinguang's voice, and from the bulging veins on the back of his neck, She could tell how much strength he was exerting in his arms and legs. The chief flight attendant glanced at the alarm again. The hydraulic auxiliary system had already failed. The intense friction had basically rendered the hydraulic auxiliary system on the plane useless. This meant that he was using the last of his human strength to fight against the brakes of this huge object. Oh my God! What are you still stepping on? In the face of this destructive power, what use is a little bit of human strength? No, he hadn't given up yet. What he was doing was not meaningless. Even if it was just a little bit of strength, it might just be the last straw to stop the plane. Even if there were only 4 wheels left, he wouldn't let go. The forest and the wall were getting closer and closer as if they were right in front of him. The chief flight attendant no longer paid attention to the situation on the dashboard. Instead, she shut her eyes tightly. 200 meters. 150 meters. 100 meters. 80 meters. 60 meters. 50 meters. 47 meters. It had stopped. The plane had stopped. Roar. The moment the plane finally stopped, all the ground crew members raised their arms and shouted in unison. The firefighters and ambulances let out ear-piercing roars as they rushed toward the plane. After a brief moment of confusion, the people on the plane began to scream and roar. The feeling of escaping from death was hard to describe. Tears of joy were not enough to describe it. It was as if a lifetime had passed. Their hearts felt as if someone had viciously dug them out from their chests and then pressed them back down. Thank God. Thank God for our captain Qin Guang. Our godlike captain. Our great captain. The person in charge of the command center felt his body go limp. He sat down on the ground, sweating profusely. He had only been standing in front of the monitor, watching from thousands of kilometers away, but he was still so nervous that he felt like he was about to collapse. Chief Qin. You're really godlike. Qin Guang sat in the captain's seat, his whole body limp. He wiped the sweat off his face and flicked his fingers. Ah, it's nothing. The scenery of Jiaodao is not bad. How did you do it? 6 tires burst, 2,950 meters of braking distance, and you only missed by 3 meters. Qin Guang wiped his sweat again. It's still not perfect. The hydraulic system malfunctioned and the last half of the plane lost its braking force. The last 4 wheels were not fully utilized. Otherwise, it would have been 2,950 meters. It was a miscalculation. I even bent the brake pedal, but it's still useless. The quality of your steel is too bad. The person in charge of the aviation center, the old men in Beijing's conference room, Exin Qin and Wu Miaoan far away in the 5 capitals, Lin Jingwei who was quietly eavesdropping, Jean Shiyue and Jiang Yage in the London hotel. In the end, everyone had the same thought in their minds. What a beast. Okay, everyone, my mission is not over yet. After he greeted everyone in the communication device, Qin Guang sat up straight with a smile on his face. He picked up the walkie-talkie with one hand and pressed the emergency button with the other. He calmed himself down and spoke in a calm tone. Hello, passengers. I am the substitute captain of this flight, Qin Guang. The plane has landed successfully. Please check if your belongings are. Anyway, please leave the cabin in an orderly manner. I have turned on the emergency evacuation system. Please do not push or panic when you leave. Leave in an orderly manner. The fuel tank is well protected by me. There is no leakage. Everything is okay. In short, thank you for your trust. I did not let you down. Mother Earth protects us. The cabin once again burst into deafening cheers. This time everyone was really sure that they were safe. Outside the window, a total of 8 fire trucks had rushed over and were spraying low-temperature fire-extinguishing foam at the floor and fuselage. Although there was no open fire at this time, cooling down was the first priority. The person in charge of the China Airlines command center widened his eyes. Even though he heard Qin Guang say it lightly once, he still could not believe his eyes. He stared blankly at DL 199333 lying dead on the ground. It was exactly as he said. 6 tires burst and stopped at about 2,950 meters. Unbelievable, this was a beginner flying a plane for the first time. How did you do it? How did you know it would be like this? After experiencing hijacking, clear air turbulence and equipment malfunctions, including but not limited to the complete failure of the right wing engine, transmission malfunctions, the failure of the deceleration pedal and the inability to use the reverse thrust of the engine. A novice pilot who had touched an airplane for the first time passed through the thunderstorm and survived with more than 300 people. And you were alone. You did the work of the entire flight crew alone. No co-pilot, no pilot, no autopilot assistance. You are a living miracle. This is a godlike forced landing. You are a godlike beginner. Wait, are you a god? Are you still human? If this person had the chance to personally ask this question in front of Qin Guang would definitely be happy to answer him. Yes, that's right, young man, standing in front of you is indeed the strongest pilot in history, a living god of aerial combat. I can fly civil aviation, but I can fly fighter jets even more. Don't panic, this forced landing is just a small test. Pressing the last emergency unblocking button, accompanied by a poochie sound, the air slides under the emergency exits on both sides of the A330 rapidly expanded and extended. Then the emergency exit doors opened and the crowd rushed down with cheers. Everyone's expression was exceptionally complicated. There was the ecstasy of escaping death and there was the paleness of shock. When they really did land on the ground from the air slides, they finally confirmed that they were completely out of danger. These people almost hysterically ran forward for a distance, or threw themselves into the arms of the rescue team, or lay limp on the ground. Some people were bawling to vent their emotions, while others were wiping their tears and taking out their phones to call their families, but they were immediately stopped. Others were hugging the rescue team to vent their emotions hysterically. Qin Guang took a deep breath and stood up from the captain's seat. The well-trained purser had already gone outside one step ahead of him. She had to stand on her last shift and maintain the evacuation order. Sun Xiaoxuan was not in a hurry to leave with the others. She waited until everyone had quickly walked out of the corridor, and then she got up and walked to the cockpit. Her heart was pounding and the thought in her heart was getting hotter and hotter. She wanted to fiercely hug him, she wanted to rub her body into the crook of his arm, she wanted to fiercely stick her lips to his, she wanted to crazily suck and smell his scent. In the past 2 days she had really experienced too much with him. He was so perfect, so outstanding, so outstanding. Perhaps she was not worthy of him at all. Compared to the other girls who liked him, she was really insignificant, like an ugly duckling in a corner. But it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. I'm not beautiful enough, not smart enough, not mature enough, and I don't have an illustrious status like the others. I really can't help him too much. But it doesn't matter, I have a heart that just wants to melt together with him. Sun Xiaoxuan walked faster and faster towards the cockpit as he thought about it. The cabin door had been opened a long time ago and a faint light shone through the glass. A tall figure that could make one's soul yearn for a long time appeared in the cabin door, looking a little tired. He slightly lowered his head and his steps were a little unsteady. He even had to hold on to the door frame when he walked and he almost fell. Qin Guang, are you all right? Sun Xiaoxuan's footsteps suddenly stopped. The slightly tired Qin Guang looked up and saw Sun Xiaoxuan and her misty eyes. What's wrong? You're so nervous that you can't walk? As he spoke, he bent down and picked up Sun Xiaoxuan's waist. His originally unsteady steps suddenly became strong. I'll carry you out, it's not a big deal. Sun Xiaoxuan screamed, and before she could explain, she was lifted up by Qin Guang like a baby. Her face suddenly turned red and this time she really felt weak. She wanted to explain something but she couldn't open her mouth. Outside, the people who had escaped from death gradually hid far away in the pitter-patter of rain. The slightly chilly breeze and raindrops gradually calmed their emotions. The tears on their faces mixed with the rainwater and gradually they did not feel that they were crying anymore. Unconsciously, the experience of life and death together seemed to condense an invisible bond in the crowd, slowly bringing everyone together again. No one knew who reacted first, but he shouted, "That's right, where's our captain?" This shout was like a huge stone thrown into a small lake, and it violently caused ripples in the crowd. That's right, the captain who saved everyone's life, Qin Guang? Why hasn't he come out yet? Did something happen to him in the cockpit? Everyone don't panic. Captain Qin will come out soon. He's too tired. The purser who was watching Qin Guang walk over with Sun Xiaoxuan in his arms and left herself in the second-last position to adjust the air slide, heard the crowd's voices and shouted loudly. After she finished speaking, she leaped down. She was still halfway down when Qin Guang appeared at the door with son Xiaoxuan in his arms. His young face looked a bit tired and his bald head was reflected by the falling rain. But at this moment the image of him carrying the girl was so tall. The chief of Jiaodao Airport's publicity department, the only person present with the identity of a reporter, opened his single-lens reflex camera from afar and quickly focused. Then with a click he recorded this historical moment. The flash of the camera was like a signal light, and it made the crowd, which had temporarily quieted down when they saw Qin Guang appear, instantly boil over. Everyone raised their arms and shouted. "Or, hero! Our hero! Hero Qin Guang!" You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.